So, my girlfriend's a bit younger than me, and she's not seen some of the like classic horror movies. So I'm taking her through some of the classics, and one of the classics that I wanted her to watch this week was The Exorcist 3. And not many people know about The Exorcist 3, but it is high tier, one of the best horror movies of all time.
Wow. Because The Exorcist, Friedkin's Exorcist, is probably one of the greats, right? So
it is, yeah.
I don't think I've seen 3.
Well, unfortunately, The Exorcist 1, when you show it to someone who's like, used to things like The Nun, right, or Insidious, like jump scares galore, they can't appreciate the tension, they can't appreciate the existential dread and stuff like that. So that's fair enough. But then Exorcist 3, and the reason that you jump Exorcist 2 is because Exorcist 2 is an embarrassing mess and it's awful. But the reason that you jump to Exorcist 3 is because Exorcist 3 is just like, it's got one of the best jump scares in it of all time, right? But one of the things that I love about movies is characters and relating to characters and how they go. Now, unfortunately, the main character in Exorcist 3 is the cop from the first one, the one who makes friends with Father Karras, Damien Karras. So it is a bit of a propaganda, but the character and the way that he's presented and all that stuff, he is sick. He's sick and tired of how evil people can be to each other.
Yeah.
And I have never related more to a character this week. My man is on the knife edge of losing his mind. Yeah. And it's me for real. He's just like me for real. So there you go.
Yeah. Interesting. I need to check that out because I love the original Exorcist movie, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff to explore within the idea of exorcisms and things like that is like so far away from all of that kind of like shitty The Nun, Insidious, whatever.
Well,
so
for me personally, it's like I'm terrified of the concept that religion is right. I'm terrified of the concept that hell is real. It's like, okay, I believe in ghosts, but where does that end? Like, am I going to go to hell for being gay? I hope not, Anyway, so there you go. That's what scares me about it.
Fascinating. Cool. I'll definitely have to check that out. So, welcome to the show, everyone. We're glad you can be here. A lot of stuff has been happening this week. I think we decided last week that this week was going to be the Palestine episode. So we're gonna get into that. We're gonna go over the history of the area, what's led up to it, some of the groups involved. We're gonna talk about the situation as it is developing now, all of that stuff, to the best of our ability. But yeah, why don't we start with the most based stuff that we did this week? Mule, you've got something in here. What was the most base thing that you did this week?
Yeah, so there was, obviously, I think everybody knows, most people who are watching know about the situation in Gaza, Palestine, and like the response from UK establishment politicians. And my MP in particular has made little to no statement, but she is in an organization called Labour Friends of Israel. And of course, it's exactly what you think it is. So I and a bunch of other members of an organization called Youth Front for Palestine. Obviously, I'm not so youthful myself, but I thought, it's all good to go there and support the youth. So went down there and took along a loudspeaker that we use for protests and stuff with GMTU. And there was someone there, one of the young people read out a statement on Gaza and trying to hold this MP. Lucy Powell is her name. I don't mind naming and shaming her. I don't think that's doxing myself particularly. She governs quite a large section of Manchester. We went down to her ward, like basically where she holds what are called, I think, counseling sessions or ward sessions or something like that, where she, wants to meet with the local people to tell her about local issues and what have you. But of course, she didn't want to speak to us. So we went down there, a bunch of us, about 20, 30 of us, marched along the road in Hume, and then up to her ward. And then, yeah, someone read out a prepared statement. And one of the main things we wanted to do was read out stories of Gazan people, like people in Gaza, people in the West Bank. And so I read a piece, a report from a journalist called Tariq S. Hajjaj from Gaza. His family lives in Gaza. He's lived in Gaza his whole life. He's been a reporter for, I think, various different people, but he was doing this particular report for Mondo Vice, which is it's a US based one that basically communicates things on the ground from Gaza to the US and the wider world and stuff. So that particular report is it's not a fun read. It's titled "This May Be My Last Report from Gaza." I read it on stream last week, not just as a kind of like preparation, because I think it is important to like continue to read this report for a long time. I won't do it here on the show because it is quite long. It's about 5 minutes or so. But if you do want to have a look at it, check it out. You could just Google it. And I also have uploaded me reading it onto my Instagram. So if you check out my Instagram, it's DJMU3L. That'll be on there later. But yeah, no, it's heartbreaking. And the day after that, yesterday, me and my partner, we went down to BBC, where there was a big protest being held by, I think it was various different organizations, but mainly Palestinian Solidarity Committee in the UK, so PSC. Palestine Solidarity Campaign. It's one of the big organizers in the UK. We went down to the BBC because the BBC have, of course, been complicit in spreading lies. Just repeating the line from the Hasbara, and just all the things like the 40 beheaded babies, the obviously like parading women around the street and raping them and all this kind of stuff. Just stuff that is unsubstantiated nonsense that is manufacturing consent for a genocide. And the turnout was incredible. We marched all the way around a bridge that goes over a canal, and then round to another bridge that comes back to the BBC headquarters. And when we got to that point, back to the BBC headquarters, we could see the other bridge, and there were still people there, still marching from that bridge. There must have been 5,000, 6,000, I don't know, I'm not great with numbers, but there must have been 5,000 or 6,000 people there. So it was really good. Everybody obviously like extremely upset, but like great to see so many people out there. That's the most base thing I did this week, I think. Tim, what about you, my friend?
So I've been doing all I can this week and I feel like we all have been doing all we can to do our part in the struggle after the PFLP released a statement just a couple of days ago, I think on the 20th, calling for help. Obviously calling for help for the struggle that we're going to be covering in general through this episode, but particularly they called for all people around the world that know of them in their struggle to defend the Palestinian narrative against the false Zionist narrative, affirming that what the resistance does is in self-defense and is a natural response to the continued occupation and aggression. So they basically said, if you can't do anything else right now, you can post, So and I did what I do best. I feel like this week has been a real eye-opener at the effect of social media on the modern landscape of war and propaganda and all that kind of stuff. Basically, the PFLP have been saying if you're, if you can push back on these narratives, debunk them, spread the information, spread, the stories of the Palestinian people. And I've seen a lot of, I've got some friends, some Palestinian friends who have said that they also really want to see people spreading stories and information about Palestine and all the occupied territories and what is now called Israel as much as you can, aside from just the war stuff. Like, let people know about the culture and the history in the area, because it's like they're literally staring down the barrel of genocide and stuff, and they're like, we want people to know not just like that we are people and we have this rich culture and like all this kind of stuff like that, but that there is like some kind of like record of what like what happened here or whatever. And and this includes not just kind of Palestinian Arab stuff, but there's like so many different cultures that have come to that area that have kind of been, I guess, like subsumed by Israel and their kind of like cultural and religious dominance. So so I've just spent the week when I can like catching up with what's actually happening, because there's a lot of stories that just aren't getting played in, it sounds corny to say, but in the mainstream media. But obviously, as people that are communists and anarchists and stuff, we know that we don't always get the full story from them anyway. But this week, I feel like it's been particularly bad. So I've spent a little week trying to like educate a lot of people that I know as well. Like even like going into work and having everyone being like, you got to tell me what's happening over there because I don't know, and I know that you'll understand it and stuff. So, just trying to like like let everyone know what's going on, because I have heard a lot of these like already thoroughly debunked lies from the IDF being spread in real life, and people being like, this is what's happening, like, and it's I think that if you are kind of privy to the information or whatever, you should be spreading it with people, because I think on the ground it seems like everyone is over here is largely in support of Palestine. Like I've seen there's been multiple pro-Palestinian rallies, like thousands and thousands of people coming out to march, flags, everything like that. I haven't seen, the only Israeli flags I've seen this week have been on Twitter. So, I think that says a lot. But so I'm gonna be cheap as fuck and say that posting was the most base thing I did this week.
And you are great at posting, Tim.
What about you, Kira?
I think I have to echo what you're saying. I've been posting a lot lately and just trying to keep up with reality and then the propaganda narrative, so I can kind of combat that narrative and stay one step ahead of it as best I can to whoever is paying attention to me. I've also been posting, but even more important, I made a hammer and sickle pumpkin yesterday. Let me show it to you right now.
Oh,
there it is on my screen, hammer and sickle pumpkin. So I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's really good. The lines are so clean and everything.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm pretty sure that made a difference. So that's the most base thing that I've done. But I've been posting a ton. Honestly, it's been very disheartening in a lot of ways, but also it's been interesting seeing the people that are aggressively trying to speak on behalf of the Palestinians who cannot speak for themselves versus a lot of people that just aren't speaking on behalf of them, that are not doing that. And so it's or even worse, trying to tell people to not speak up on the Palestinians' behalf, or repeating the IDF narrative. So it's been a rough time. Obviously, not nearly even quite at all as rough as what's going on, right? But it's been. I think a lot of people can probably agree with what I'm saying, with the sentiment I'm expressing, and that it's always really tough to see. Even when the smallest of stakes, like the stake of being liked on the internet, that people are willing to still take certain sides, and it's kind of disappointing to see. But I've been trying to do my teeny tiny little part as much as I can, and just post away. So yeah.
It does seem kind of silly, but I think that looking at the way that social media has been over the last week, where the IDF is posting some really kind of wild stuff, and how it has been just normal people that have been kind of debunking it, like there's like a lot of stuff where it's like, they'll post a video of something of, like an alleged occurrence or whatever, and then someone else will just be like, hey, I found this video 3 years ago. It's actually from this, and just like stuff like that. And it's like wild, and how it's like that completely just undermines their narrative, which I think is like there's not much that any of us here can do from our homes aside from, you know, like donating and, you know, like kind of attending rallies and, you know, trying to do that kind of stuff. You know, like I know people that have literally flown overseas to like take part in various struggles and all this kind of stuff, but you can't really do that with this because it's on lockdown. You know, it's like, I mean, there were people flying over, like I saw some dudes from New Zealand going over to fight for Israel, but it's like, what are you doing? Like, you know, it's like yeah. So there are pretty limited options about how you can actually help out this time. So I think, like, you know, if you can't do anything else, you can post, you can get it out there.
I also feel like it's a little bit more responsible and like feel like a little more of a push of obligation to have to speak up because my country is like they're funding Israel's existence, right?
Yeah.
Israel wouldn't exist if America wasn't bolstering it with billions and billions of dollars.
I mean, like Joe Biden said in 1986, if
Friend of the show.
Israel didn't exist, it would be necessary to create it. So,
yeah.
You know,
friend of the show, Joe Biden. Thank you, sir, for your service, and you're explicitly saying the thing. So we don't have to even connect any dots there. You just said the thing. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I feel like for me, like a lot of the stuff that I've been looking at, and there's like some stuff I've been posting about that people may have seen on Twitter, is there are a couple of Israeli orgs in New Zealand that really are trying to focus on building solidarity with Maori and Pacifica communities for various reasons, and they do often push this kind of like indigenous solidarity kind of thing or whatever like that, and they hugely overplay how popular they are. It's literally like it's a handful of people that are all like writing articles, putting them out, posting them on blogs, linking them around the same couple things. And, you know, the Times of Israel will be like posting these articles being like, this is how much Maori people love us and look up to us, and we have this solidarity and like all this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's literally like a handful of people. So I've been devoting a little bit of time this week to really kind of like exposing that, because, you know, some of these people are literally like from, you know, like the same tribe as me. And it's like, I know that they're not, like, they will post online about like this person is like this, you know, really esteemed, like, you know, like elder figure and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, he's just an old person. Like, you know, like it's just stuff like that, you know. And, you know, because I guess the community is so small, I think it's like really, that's probably one of the more effective angles I can take it. But there is like, there is a more nefarious side to it, aside from them just kind of like LARPing as, you know, indigenous people, which, you know, is Israeli Jews are not the indigenous people of Israel, you know. It's just completely, yeah, that's just a completely manufactured kind of argument. But they are trying to get as many small Pacific nations as they can on board, like Samoa, Tonga and stuff, because all of those countries, you know, when you have big, you know, like World Forum things, UN meetings and stuff like that, even like a small country like that will have a vote. And it is really important for them to get as many people on side as possible. And it's a very low cost investment for them to, you know, to kind of get an extra vote by, I guess, cozying up to, you know, like just a small nation down here in the South Pacific. So I think it's, if you're down here if you're down here in Australia, New Zealand, if you're out on the islands, I don't know. I know that we do have some fans from Tonga and Samoa. If you're out any there and you see people, you know, like they get involved with a lot of church groups and stuff like that, I think it's your duty in the posting war to educate the people around you about what Israel is really doing. And I would say emphasize the similarities between what Israel is doing to Palestine to what, you know, like various other nations have done throughout the Pacific for, you know, you know, just as long. So yeah, you know,
Fully.
that's it. That's what we've been doing this week.
We have a based viewer. So I hope I'm pronouncing this right, but I have a friend with the same name, so I think it's the same. But Xenia, she has told us a bunch of based stuff this week, much longer than we can include in full. But we wanted to shout her out for taking steps to begin organizing this week. Xenia writes, I've made an open call to the local trans community to organize ourselves. We've been recently fucked over by a shitty NGO, so I see an opportunity to build some mutual aid. People seem to have responded with interest, and I know the more active organizers in the community will support this action. It feels great to really put my politics into practice. So that is so awesome. I love that. Every single one of these, I love reading them. I love hearing them. It's great to know that we have an impact on like getting people to do it, because that is the whole point of this show. So please, we want to know what base things you've been doing. You can message us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok. Send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. That's based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode. So thanks so much, Xenia. Now, the news is a little scuffed this week because most of the news is about the ongoing genocide in Palestine. And of course, we're going to be doing the main section of the show about that specifically. So we have a little bit of stuff to talk about. Let's talk briefly just about some climate stuff. So we have some news about the ozone layer. So people, if you're as old as me or older, you will remember that the ozone hole was one of the biggest things in the 90s. It was the huge sort of environmental thing, and I don't quite remember. Maybe my co-hosts can help me with this, but like I think the thing was there was a certain chemical in sprays, in deodorant and hairspray and stuff, right?
Yeah. So it's like aerosol sprays release, was it CFCs?
That's
it. So it's just kind of like, the ozone layer, it's not really like a layer of one particular thing, but it's like a combination of different gases sitting at different, elevations due to pressure and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And so with enough other chemicals or any other changes or whatever, this is obviously like a balance that can be shifted. Climate change is like a combination of all these different things, right? All these different systems. And it's just the ozone layer is part of it. So yeah, there's been this whole, I know a bit more probably about it, because the thing they always told us when I was young was that the ozone layer, the hole in the ozone layer is actually, it's over New Zealand, which I don't know if it is or if it's just like part of it or whatever.
Right.
But if there's anyone here that has ever been to New Zealand from another country, you'll probably notice that you get sunburned really like a lot faster here than you do in other countries. And I've noticed that, like, because like I will tattoo people, like, travelers, like tourists and stuff like that, that'll
Brits.
be here and they'll be like, here for like a week or something like that, and they'll be just like super tanned or like sunburned or like, they won't be able to get tattooed or whatever, and they're just like, I just went to the beach like yesterday and I'm already like fucked up, so that's like a thing that, and they taught us a lot about it in school, growing up. They were like, this is happening, and unfortunately it's like, right above us or whatever. So I don't know, I don't remember seeing on a map like, whatever, but so yeah, but it's still been growing because no one has done anything about like climate change, nothing reasonable anywhere.
Well, I feel like I remember hearing some news a while ago. I don't know how correct this is, but that in like the middle of the 2000s or 2007 or something, like the hole in the ozone layer was better, and now it's gone completely the other way again. Yeah.
All right.
That seems to be what like this particular article is saying. So there's a satellite up there called the Copernicus Sentinel 5P, and it shows that this year's ozone hole over Antarctica, actually. So not. Oh,
right. Well, that's really close to us. Yeah. We're like very. I think we're like the closest landmass to Antarctica or whatever.
Yes.
So yeah. I guess because it'll be like the Earth will be spinning, right? It'll be spinning around,
and
so the gases will kind of like accumulate around the tip, probably. So.
For real, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Mm.
So scientists are calling it an ozone depleting area, and it apparently reached the size of 26 million square kilometers on the 16th of September this year, roughly 3 times the size of Brazil. Diego Loyola, DLR senior scientist, commented the Sentinel 5P total ozone products have an accuracy at the percentage level compared with ground-based data, and this allows us to closely monitor the ozone layer and its evolution. The Traponi measurements are extending the global ozone data record of European satellite sensors covering almost 3 decades. And it says also that the variability of the size of the ozone hole is largely determined by the strength of a strong wind band that flows around the Antarctic area. So exactly what you're saying, Tim, like the gases are basically like accumulating because of the flow of wind in that particular place in the planet, a direct consequence of the Earth's rotation, it says.
Yeah. So we've had some great feedback in the chat saying that it's not just the CFCs in aerosols, but also refrigerants. So they, like in any kind of like fridge or anything like that, and air conditioning unit. And while they have been replaced with, like other things over the years, like low ozone stuff, there's still, it still does have an effect. And you can, like the little stickers that you get on a fridge and it has little star ratings, stuff like that, But so that's a little bit of additional knowledge. But yeah, okay, cool. Well, glad that that's getting worse. Sounds great.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
In other news, I forgot to eat today. I'm just realizing that. Do you mind if I grab a slice of pizza for myself?
You go and eat, Kira. Don't worry. Me and
Wow,
Tim
thanks.
will handle
We'll take
Hope
this
everyone-
next one.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
Cool. So SAG-AFTRA, so that's the Screen Actors Guild, they've been wanting to continue bargaining, but AMPTP just walked away from the table, I think about 10 days ago. So if you're just tuning in, we have covered this before in past streams, but the Screen Actors Guild have been striking alongside the Writers Guild of America. The Writers Guild of America recently actually, they got the demands. They fucking nailed it, So that was awesome. But the Screen Actors Guild is still working on their own. So Screen Actors Guild, it covers everyone from like background extras in TV shows all the way up to, the George Clooney's and all that kind of stuff. But obviously some people have more to gain from, being there. Like they're a huge portion of their membership is just working class actors, like the day-to-day job kind of people. It's the AMPTP have kind of tried a couple of smears where they're like, oh, these rich Hollywood actors, they just want more money out of us poor studio executives. But it's like absolutely not the case whatsoever. No. While their membership does include people that are, like really well-paid actors, the bulk of them are just literally just, extras and, and even just like people that are doing, people doing commercials and things like that. So they've been bargaining on and off for a while, but about 10 days ago, MPTP were like, what you want is too much, and we're just stepping away. So the head of SAG-AFTRA, which is actually Fran Drescher, the nanny, she has spoke about it and said that AMPTP were misrepresenting their demands. And the numbers that they were, like, they basically came out and they said, this is how much this is going to cost us. This is unreasonable. And they're saying, no, these calculations aren't correct. These aren't the numbers that we gave you or anything like that. It's actually really reasonable. And, there were claims that the AMPTP were deliberately misrepresenting their demands to try and sway public opinion, which has been a huge thing throughout the WGA strikes and through these ones as well, the SAG-AFTRA strikes. So some of the things that the Guild are asking for is like, expanded like healthcare and things like that. for the studios to be paying into, you know, like the kind of healthcare plans and all this kind of stuff, but also just to cover non-guild kind of, you know, people and stuff like that, just in general to raise the bar for what execs pay actors and stuff. So like a couple of days ago, a bunch of the super rich actors were like, look, we want this all to be wrapped up. So what we're prepared to do is we're gonna put a bunch of our money in together every year, and we're gonna pay for all these things for the actors. And so, you know, a lot of people were like, oh wow, that's so kind of them or whatever. But SAG-AFTRA actually was like, no, like, look, we appreciate the gesture, we know what you guys want, but this undermines the strike, because that means that instead of getting these things from the studios, we're just putting that back on other actors. And, you know, it's like, this is stuff that the bosses should be paying us for, and it's not unreasonable to ask for that. So, you know, thanks, but no thanks. We can't, you know, we're not going to accept that. Yeah, and which is like, I think a really, it's a brave move from them, and it's absolutely the correct move, because it would have been easy just to be like, yeah, let's just do it and go back to work. And, you know, this was like George Clooney and stuff that were, you know, like offering to put this money in. And I mean, it's like, I think in that case, the best thing what they could have been doing could have been paying that same money into like a strike fund or something, you know, like,
Right.
But so AMPT just announced, I think yesterday or the day before, that they are coming back to the table, which is good, because it shows that, you know, this is like them stepping away from the table is kind of like a bluff, right? And because they held out, AMPTP are having to come back to the table now and be like, oh, okay, all right, let's continue negotiations. So starting on the 24th this week, 24th Tuesday, they're back at it, which means this will be over, so this is about 100 days of SAG-AFTRA strike now. Hopefully we can get a good resolution for them, like we got, there was a good resolution for the WGA strikes. And I think that both of those strikes will have long-term positive effects. You know, like if they can get what they're after, and like I think just the general bar for like TV and movies and everything will get better again. Like with the
absolutely
with the writers' strike, I think particularly in regards to, you know, everyone's complaining these days about like, man, all these Netflix shows are the same and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, well, this is the antidote to that, you know. So if you want well-written TV shows, you know, like this is what you got to do. And if you want actors that actually are, you know, taken care of and can actually have proper careers where they act, you know, professionally for their entire lives, and they're not having to do other stuff as well, they're treated just like a job like anything else, the SAG-AFTRA strike is important for that, you know. And it's a lot of people will, you know, kind of act like, oh, this is just, you know, bougie actors, whatever, like that, it doesn't matter. But I think that really downplays the, you know, just like I was saying earlier, the amount of working class actors that are out there. Everyone watches TV, everyone watches movies and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's pretty disrespectful to the workers in those industries to kind of make those kind of bourgeois acting arguments, knowing that the majority of these guild members are just people, working class people like you and me. And also there has been some footage released of TV shows and movies where they have not been able to hire extras because of the strikes. So instead they have used computer animated extras, and they're so bad. Like most video games have better cutscenes than that, and there'll be like people in the crowd behind, and they're just like looking like C-3PO and stuff like that. It's like, that's what you get. Like if that's, you know, like that's what
I'm planning a video because I'm, you know me, I'm a paranormal weirdo. I love watching like my UFO documentaries, I love watching my ghost documentaries, and I found one recently it was about UFOs, and something kind of struck me as off about it. I was like, this feels weird. It like doesn't feel real. It feels like what I remember it was like to take too much ketamine and like get really dissociated and like nothing kind of feels real anymore. And I was like, what's happening? So then I looked into it, and so I looked at like the producer, and it was this one guy. I think his name was like Oliver Stone or something like that. Not the famous Oliver Stone, but like some random British guy. And he'd made 100 other documentaries this year. Right? Now, anyone who works in any kind of production, even if it's YouTube, even if it's YouTube, you're not making 100 videos a year. It's not happening. That's completely absurd. Like, what are you on about? Like, unless these videos are just like, well, do you know what? I think it was a bit wrong to say YouTube, because I imagine some people could make 100 YouTube videos a year, but you know what I mean? Like, in terms of like a high production quality, documentary, and I knew it. I just knew it. Like all these different documentaries have come out in 2023. And of course, what's happened in 2023? Well, it was the writers' strike. Well, it was the actors' strike. Of course, it's all documentary based stuff. And this loser is like writing all these documentaries on ChatGPT, and just like, you know, hiring a voice actor scab to do the voice acting. You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, it was just so obvious.
I did see there was someone had put out like a documentary on the current Israel-Palestine conflict, and it was all AI made and stuff, and it was like really bizarre. Someone had posted it. It was like a production company and stuff, and they'd put it up on Twitter, and it was like, you know, just like a bunch of moving pictures with like a kind of voice. You know,
that's
like
exactly what this was. That's exactly what this was. Yeah.
And it was bizarre because it was like the script for it was just not really saying anything. You know, it was being like, this conflict is so old and really complicated, and
this is definitely the same guy.
Yeah.
It's 100% the same guy. Not saying anything at all, but a lot of random, Yeah.
And just like, and it's like, you're not saying anything. You seem like, you know, like when you're when you do speeches in class at like primary school,
that's what
you're trying to like, you didn't write anything. You like, you like were too, you know, like
you did it all an hour before the class.
Oh, you're just like freestyling. You're just like making it up as you go along. You know, you're just like, so it is impossible to say who is good, and that's just like
literally. Oh, this is definitely the same guy. I'm gonna look into this after the stream, but I'm certain it's the same guy.
Probably.
All right.
Yeah.
It just sounds like when I'm listening to you two, and it just sounds like you just don't like innovation.
You know what?
I actually hate innovation.
I actually hate innovation. I think there should be one video game, one film, one drawing for everyone to look at, and that's it. I think that if we had socialism, then we'd get all the best artists together. In fact, not even the best artists, because we'd all have the chance to have art and contribute to the one big painting.
We all get to do a little line on
everyone
on the drawing. And
with the same brush, because it's our brush.
Yeah, our brush, comrade.
Yeah.
Our brush. You can't have more than one brush. What do you think this is? Like extravagant capitalism?
Yeah, totally. It's all it's about. I mean, yeah, you've seen the Jewish flag. There's like one brush in the middle. That's it.
Yeah,
that's
literally, that's it.
That's the people's brush. Yeah, so that's our other news. You know, like hopefully that this strike pays off, because I think it really has shown, like, they've called the bluff. Sorry, they called the bluff of the studio, and now the studios are coming back being like, okay, maybe we'll continue negotiations. So we'll see how that develops. We'll probably update again, I guess, you know, next week or whenever there's more to update you on. But
I haven't got this in. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tim, because I forgot to put this in the document. But there is something to report on in terms of the comments of the show, because Palestine Action are, of course.
Yes.
One of the things they did this week was they drove a van into the Elbit Systems factory in Leicester, here in the UK. and there were two actionists who managed to stay on the roof of the van for quite a decent amount of time before the coppers finally got them off. There's a very funny video of the police sort of pointing tasers at a security guard because he's kind of got like a balaclava on and stuff. And he's like, no, I'm one of you. It was so funny. Like, you know, so if you want a bit of a laugh, you could check that out. Yeah, he was shouting, I'm with you, and they were just like pointing the tasers at him.
No, I'm also a fascist. No.
Yeah, I'm also doing genocide. I'm also protecting genocide. Yeah, so that's very funny. But of course, that's not the only thing that they have done. There is actually Palestine action in the US. I think I might have mentioned this last week, but I do just want to point out to our comrades in the US that Palestine action is in the US as well.
They've been doing actions, just like similar to the UK ones. You know, they've been tracking down the Albert Systems factories, you know, painting them with red paint, and
they actually went to not BBC, so there were different like BBC offices all over the country, but BBC Scotland is in Glasgow, and some Palestine action activists went there and painted I think complicit in red. They spray painted complicit in red, or genocide or something like that on the offices in Scotland. They've also released a map. If you go to their website, I think I mentioned this last week, but I do think it's important to reiterate that if there is anything that you want to do, that you want to get involved with, of course, operating entirely within the law. We would never tell you to break the law here on Red Planet, because the law is, of course, correct and morally correct and true.
And we love Joe Biden.
We love Joe Biden. Oh, I love Joe Biden. Definitely vote blue no matter who. Vote blue no matter who, no matter what they say about Israel or genocide.
No matter the war crimes.
Just vote blue. Just vote blue. It's good and right to do so. But yeah, so you could go to Palestine. I believe it's pal-action or pal-action.com/map. I might be wrong on that, but even if you just Google Palestine Action Map, you will be able to find a list of sites in the UK where you can get involved with actions with your local Palestine Action group.
And the links to all that's going to be in the show notes on Patreon. So if you're check out our Patreon for sure at patreon.com/red_planet.
Yeah. Before we carry on, I just want to point out, so speaking of Palestine action US, this has been one of the kind of more interesting things that I have seen this week in regards to, you know, like how we all know that Twitter is totally just like, it's a rigged game, you know, it's like Elon's faves get what they get, and free speech doesn't exist on that platform anymore, unfortunately. A great example of this is the Palestine Action US Twitter page, pal_action US at Twitter, and follow their account. And then if you like refresh the page or you leave and come back, you'll find that you're not following their account anymore. And they've reported their following count just like going from, I think, between like 25K down to like 200 or something, just like randomly all over the place. And something's going on there, you know, like, and people have been talking about it for the last week or so. Every time I go, I click follow. I just did it right then. And then, you know, refresh the page, not following anymore, but you can follow any other account. It all works, all that kind of stuff. I would suggest, you know, people try it out to see what I mean, see what I'm talking about. Even every time I refresh, the follow account changes and stuff. It's it's like, it's wild, right?
Yeah. Also, if you click on their followers, so if you click on the number of followers they have 37,000 followers. You click on that, then it says pal_action US doesn't have any followers.
Yeah.
And so they're not even listing the existing followers. Now, I personally think this is all one big misunderstanding, because Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist. So he would never. I think this is just a technical glitch. A wire fell out of the Twitter building. And I think that's happening right now, because I can't imagine that apartheid Elon would want to, you know, silence the indigenous voices that are trying to resist apartheid. That isn't.
Yeah. I can't imagine apartheid Clyde Elon Musk,
Yeah.
who grew up the beneficiary of South African emerald mine under apartheid. I cannot imagine him ever possibly supporting an apartheid regime. I just can't imagine it.
Actually, now when you put it that way, I'm starting to think.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that something
Maybe there might be something there.
So that's an interesting little thing that, you know, maybe that'll pop up again in the future. I don't know. I feel like there's so many lawsuits and stuff going on around Twitter. I wouldn't be surprised if that, you know, ended up getting mentioned at some point. But yeah, it's wild, right? That's the suppression that the right are always like claiming happens to them. But you know, here we go in real time. So yeah, so that's the news. Well, why don't we let's talk a little bit about how if you enjoy the show and you want to support us, one of the best things you can do for us is to jump on over to www.patreon.com/red_planet. You can subscribe to our Patreon. There's a couple of different membership tiers, all the way from just like a couple bucks up to a couple hundred if you are a true sicko. Yeah, and that helps us put the show together, helps pay for our producer and everything like that. We're almost at the point where we can afford to hire an editor as well. We're so close.
Extremely exciting. Extremely exciting.
Yeah. Which would be awesome. So yeah, if you want to support the show, if you like what we do, you can jump over there and yeah, get amongst it. And yeah, cool.
Among Us.
We'll come back to that a little bit later.
And if you don't enjoy the show, you should still give us money. Ironically, that would be such an epic burn.
It would be a huge.
I would shit and piss all over my apartment.
Definitely don't. Yeah, definitely don't like subscribe to our Patreon and see like our secret posts that like really tells you the truth about Red Planet and the hosts. Red Planet exposed? No, I don't think so. You don't want to see that stuff. You don't want to see that stuff. So give us money. Yeah.
Yeah, do the Joe Biden thing where you can condemn us publicly but still send us like a sly Billy here or there. Yeah. All right, cool. So that's,
I think we're all at least for me, I'm like my brain is so fried from everything that's going on that I'm just like in pure Joker mode. So I apologize in advance I apologize now and in advance for all my sarcasm. I'm gonna try to cut it down, but I'm in Joker mode.
Everybody who finds it hard to detect sarcasm, we'll do our best. We'll do our best to give you a live tone indicator as to whether we're being sarcastic or not. Hopefully, you've watched the show long enough to know to find out which things we're actually being sarcastic about and which ones we're not. But anyway, we are here today to talk to you about the thing that is the most pressing right now. It is the situation in Gaza. We're talking about the genocide that is happening in Gaza. I think at Red Planet, we don't really have an intro written up for this, but I think my co-hosts will agree with me and say that we are not here to mince words. We are not here to both sides the issue. We are aware of the entire occupation in context. It has been a 75-year-long genocide. And I think it's important to remember that, and I think it's important to call it what it is. And we have a lot of things to talk about. We've tried very hard to make this as, I guess, structured as possible. And Kira's done an amazing job of throwing in some links, and me and Tim have been getting in amongst that as well ourselves. But it's there's a lot of stuff to go through. So I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer to go first to talk about particular things. Does anyone want to start off with the early history?
Yes. So while the real, I guess, kind of meat of it started about 75 years ago now, it kind of goes back a little bit further than that. A lot of people will say that to really kind of cover it, you do need to go back to the Ottoman Empire, basically, which during the late 1800s, 1900s, there was a slow trickle of Jewish immigrants moving back to Palestine, which was still then part of the Ottoman Empire. Just like over time and stuff, obviously Judaism has a history in the area, like there's I mean, there's been so many different ethnic groups, different religious groups there over time. It was like such, like you think about all, aside from just like the religious stuff, but also kind of just like all the history of the area, there have just been so many people coming and going over the years. And so a lot of people were like, we're going to start moving back towards Jerusalem. In 1917, so during the First World War, there was a thing called the Balfour Declaration. So this was the British government saying, we support the idea of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. So yeah, at the time, it was an Ottoman region with a very, very small minority of Jewish people. And these are the people that had been so there's Palestinian Jews, like Arab Jews that have always been there and have never left. And these people are, Palestinian. And then there's, the people from the Jewish diaspora and people that had, cultural Jews, people that had converted to Judaism that have moved back since then. And so there was still a relatively minor population there at the time. That's when the start of the idea of a Jewish homeland on Palestinian land came from, the Balfour Declaration.
Can I just add a bit of context, because I spoke about this on my stream this week, because supporter of Red Planet, supporter of various streams, and everybody here, I think all the co-hosts, Husker do, has a copy of Diaspora Boy, which is an amazing book. He sent me a couple of pages from it, because Zionism actually started earlier, like around sort of the late 1800s. And the grandfather of Zionism is a fellow called Theodor Herzl. Now, Theodor Herzl said some incredibly absurd things about Jews themselves. And I do want to like sort of, just sort of touch on that, because the Zionist line is very horrible to diaspora Jews. It says they don't have any culture. It says they don't have any land underneath their feet, so they don't have a soul. And if you do not subscribe to the Zionist line and go to the Jewish homeland, wherever that was going to be, because at that point they had several ideas of where it was going to be. They were either going to have it in Argentina or Kenya, and there was another place, but also Palestine. And obviously Palestine was the one that was the most available, because the Zionists had a lot of connections with the UK government. There was actually the World Zionist Organization at that time. And that is why, so just to add context to what Tim's saying, and so why did these Jews all of a sudden, decide that this was a good idea? That was why there was the Zionist line. And honestly, some of the things I do just want to point out, like, because I had no idea about this. I learned this week, but some of the things that Zionists said about diaspora Jews, you could take the quote thing, whoever said it, you could take that away, if it's Max Nordau or Theodor Herzl or any of these other guys, and you could replace it with Adolf Hitler and no one would know the difference. It was extremely anti-Semitic stuff. Saying that they're like hunchbacked and they have like no sort of like strength, like that, the lack of their homeland makes them weak and subject to like assimilation and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's really important to preface that, because that, this will make more sense going later when we discuss how Zionism is not Judaism, basically. But yeah, sorry, go on, Tim.
Herzl himself, he was like, anti-Semitism will help us because fostering these ideas will make other Western, like governments and stuff want to help us to get rid of their Jews, like sort of thing, which is like, just like, like a bizarre thing to say about your people. But there's quotes from him saying these anti-Semites will become our most dependable friends. It's like, well, yeah, yes, that absolutely happened.
Yep.
There was like lots of wild stuff with, like early Nazi Germany and Zionism, where it's like they basically were just like agreeing on a lot of stuff. It's like, yeah, it's pretty brutal.
it's also super important to remember that at the time, well, not to remember, but just to mention to everybody, if you're not aware, that even at the time, there was mass Jewish resistance to Zionism. Yeah. They did not want to participate in colonialism, and anyone who has studied the Torah, anyone who has studied the religious texts of Judaism knows that any kind of like baseless hatred is completely against the Jewish faith. And the idea of you know, having the Jewish homeland is only something that should be, and this is in the Torah. I'm not like speaking for Jews here. Like this is, you can find this, you can read this. The establishment of the state of Israel is only something that should be done when the Messiah comes. So this is something that is like, you know, we are not to do this off our own back. We are not to decide. We have to wait for our messenger of God to tell us when this happens. And that's why a lot of Orthodox Jews and just Jews in the diaspora, even if they're casual in terms of like, you know, supporting their religion, they are against Zionism.
Yeah, I think all of the Jewish people that I know are all anti-Zionists, you know, and some of these people are Israeli Jews. They used to work for a woman who owned a tattoo shop in Australia who was an anti-Zionist Israeli Jew. And she said that, yeah, her entire life, she kind of, you know, was like groomed to believe, you know, a certain kind of perspective about, you know, about Zionism, about Israel and all this kind of stuff. And it was only on moving outside of that sphere and moving to Australia, where she didn't really know anyone and kind of got away from it, that she was like, oh man, like I've totally been brainwashed, you know? So it's strong. The ideological project is very, very strong.
Defo.
So yeah, so Balfour Declaration. So even like Jewish people in England at the time, Jewish MPs and stuff, were just like, wait a minute, like what the fuck, you know? Like a lot of them were like, yeah, this is not good, you know? Yeah, and then so a couple of years later, after World War I, England actually gained control of Palestine under a mandate from the League of Nations. The League of Nations is kind of like the pre-UN, you know?
Yeah.
Sounds kind of just like the more supervillain version.
It actually does, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and during this period, the Jewish population was growing, and there was, you know, the growing Zionism, which is like the Jewish nationalist kind of movement that was growing in Palestine, was leading to a lot more kind of conflicts and stuff. And so, you know, like this is kind of when the heat starts turning up, or whatever. And so, yeah, then so after World War II, there was they obviously, you know, we had this like huge amount of displaced Jewish people from all over Europe, all over the world, that you know, like a lot of them just felt like they had nowhere to go, and there was like a distinct thing. Like this is like when it really kind of became a thing, like, okay, like, you know, like, and you see like all these people at the time. And it's wild to look back on it, because it's like, this is like obviously so like, I mean, you know, it's like the kind of looking back at history is always like this, right? Where it's like, you can see kind of what's happening here, where there's like, there are these people that have had like the worst thing possible has happened to their people and their culture and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, you see all these like opportunists being like, oh, wait, we can, you know, like we can use this. And so this is when you start to see a lot more, like, you know, like a lot of these people that were some of the founders of Zionism, founders of Israel, start saying like, this could be an opportunity for our colonial project, you know, like literally using those words, being like, we need to colonize this area. We need to displace, you know, the Arabs that are there already, and just like using the exact same language that was used against them, you know? Yeah, and it's wild. And, you know, like Neil was saying, there were even like floated other places for them to settle and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, there was a bunch of people from my tribe, Napui, who like were like, we will donate land for you guys. Like we, you know, like we have land that we will give the Jews, basically, which is like wild to think that there could have been like a, you know, Jewish homeland in Taitokoro. But yeah, and there was even Aboriginal Australians did the same thing, because they were like, we've, like we know, more than anyone, like where you guys are at right now, Aboriginal Australians went through like a horrific ethnic cleansing project that, still carries on to this day, sort of thing. Yeah, I think this is where you get to the weird thing where it's like there's the Jewish culture and religion, and then there's the state of Israel, and Israel profits from there being no distinction, and so they're saying it's important for us to return to this Holy Land in particular because it's ours, but then also framing it as like a secular state and all this kind of stuff like that. And it's and so they kind of pushed it really hard that it has to be here, even though the majority of a lot of the people that have moved into Israel since are not like not from the area. Like, they say this is a homeland for all Jews, but it's only in the way that it's also the homeland for all Christians and all this kind of stuff. It's like where the culture springs from, but it's like, like a lot of these people, and it's like, this is the thing where you see it, where it's like people that are like from America, from England and stuff, who are like, they don't have a actual kind of tie to the area in the way that indigenous people generally do, like displaced indigenous people, where it's like they were the dominant ethnic group there for years, and they were, pushed out, exiled, shifted around, whatever, like that, and they're coming back. A lot of the people that, like a lot of these Zionists that really, basically the dominant group in Israel at the moment are people that are, like Europeans and Americans and stuff that have culturally mixed, adopted, or like even just like, whatever, into Judaism and then returned later. So it's like a lot of people will make out that as anti-Semitic to say that. But I think that you have to be realistic about there's a difference between someone that is like, Jewish as a religion or as a culture, or as, like ethnically kind of like, from the Levant, like actually Semitic.
I think that's a really good point, Tim, because one of the ways in which the occupation is, lauded as a conflict, it's described as a conflict in in quotation marks or inverted commas, whatever you want to say, to sort of delegitimize what they're actually saying. But they kind of paint it as Muslims versus Jews, which is completely incorrect. It's completely incorrect, and it ties into Islamophobia and racist white supremacist tropes in the Imperial Core, which is of course like who funds and supports Israel. There are Mizrahim, who are Arab Jews, and they all lived there. They lived there with Muslims and Christians, all peacefully together. Until the Zionists came.
Yeah. And there's like Ethiopian Jews, everything like that. Like there's also like the Christians, there's a huge Christian population there as well. From everywhere, from Ethiopian Christians, like actual, like Arab Christian, Palestinian Christians. Everything also, like that.
I learned Armenian Christians. I didn't even know this, but in Jerusalem there is like a sector for Armenian Christians who, like, a lot of monks in the Middle Ages became Christian in Armenia, and then they came to Jerusalem and settled there, and again lived in peace with the rest of the population until the Zionists came.
There's I actually was posting on Twitter yesterday about the world's oldest tattoo shop is in Jerusalem. And it's been there since, they don't even know exactly when it was settled there, but at least since the 1740s. And it's an Egyptian family of Coptic Christians that, because everyone used to go there on pilgrimage, and the thing was that, you would get a tattoo when you got there of a Coptic cross to say, I've been to the Holy Land or whatever. So they were doing this way back in the day, and it's a continuous line, almost 30 generations of families and stuff. And it's like,
amazing.
you know, like who we were talking about the other week, Haile Selassie, the king of Ethiopia, he was tattooed there, you know, like just
No
like
way.
stuff like that. Like there's this huge culture of like different groups from all around Africa, all around Europe and like Eastern Europe and everything like that coming through that area. And people, you know, like this was an Egyptian family that came there and stayed. And this was hundreds of years ago, you know, like there's so many different groups there of different faiths. And actually the Razuk family who run this shop have spoken a lot about the way that since Israel has existed, because their shop and their family have, you know, their tattoo shop has predated the state
Seen
of
it
Israel.
happen. Yeah.
They've seen it happen in the way that that Christians have since been disenfranchised by the new Israeli government, and how it is tied to their religion and stuff. It's just like the main thing obviously is that, you know, the religion stuff I think is kind of like, that's like the culture war aspect of it, where it's like
Absolutely.
really the real shit is like the control, the power, the resources, the capital, all this kind of stuff, you know, America, all this kind of stuff like that. But they do things to make people feel unwelcome, because they know that, you know, the Coptic Christians aren't really kind of, you know, they're not really fucking with the Zionist line or whatever like that. So it's like whatever they can do to make them feel unwelcome, you know. And this is just like that kind of background radiation of like, you know, like the microaggressions and the, you know, kind of like all that little stuff or whatever. So yeah, and they've spoken a lot about how that has changed over the years for Christians in that area. And they've also been yeah, really outspoken about the treatments of Palestinian Arabs as well. So which is you know, go them. But yeah, so anyways, post-Holocaust now, the founders of Israel decided this will be our place, basically. And the United Nations, which at the time was largely like the UK and co, I mean, still is, but it used to be the UK was like really the more powerful one. Now it's more American. So they decided, we're going to split this land that is Palestine. We're going to partition it into two separate Jewish and Arab states. So the Arab states and, you know, and the people of Palestine were like, yeah, actually, let's not do that. Let's just stay as we are. We're like, you know, we are Palestine, but we have Jewish people here. That's fine. We don't need, you know, we don't need to do any of this stuff. Whereas the founders of Israel were like, let's do it. Let's go. So they just went ahead and did it.
I think also it should be stated that like the indigenous Palestinians, they were ready to welcome Jewish refugees from Europe. They were not opposed to this.
No, totally. There's you can see photos of them welcoming them in, you know, like and everything like that. And they were just like, they just said, they were like, we don't need separate states. We, you know, like we can just live together. You know, like you can just come. Yeah,
we've always had Jewish people here. Yeah, we can have more.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally.
You know? And so they established the separate states. Tensions kept rising, which led to like a year later, the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which was really horrific. Like, yeah, thousands and thousands of people died, and ended with what you may hear referred to as the Nakba. So the Nakba means catastrophe in Arabic, and it's basically the forced displacement of somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 Palestinians. Most cases are around 750,000. So it's just huge amount of people pushed out, sent around the world. And, you know, which is like, yeah, so wild. And you can see it. There's like literally like photos of them literally just walked out, you know, like literally just totally. And so even before that, a lot of Palestinian people were leaving because of the war and all this kind of stuff. It had just become a generally really unsafe place. So a lot of people had started just moving out and spreading out anyway. But yeah, the Nakba is when it was like they were literally just forced out.
The Deir Yassin massacre is widely regarded as one of the key moments in the Nakba. And that was a village, it was a Palestinian village, where a Zionist militia went in and just massacred 100 Palestinians, or it might be 100 Palestinians or 100 Palestinian families in their homes. There was a resistance, and in fact, you can actually find interviews with survivors of the Deir Yassin massacre, who said exactly what the Zionists did. A lot of the Palestinians who were captured were paraded through Israeli towns. They were spat on, they were tortured, they were murdered. A lot of women were sexually assaulted, they were raped, and they brag about it. I cannot stress this enough. They brag about it.
There's literally videos of like these soldiers that are bragging about what they did, and it's like, it's wild. It's like, you know, like these guys just like laughing about it, being like, you know, like it was, you know, like how you get that, those kind of old guys that love to tell their war stories, but it'll be like, oh, this time, you know, like we tricked Johnny with a grenade or whatever like that, except it's just like, instead of just like dumb old dudes like playing pranks on each other, it's like literally people talking about like just doing like the most horrific shit.
It's like you know, and they will hate us for saying this. Like the Israeli propaganda machine hates any kind of comparison to this, but it's like listening to Nazis. It's like listening to Nazis who did the fucking Holocaust brag about the Holocaust. Like that, it's exactly like that.
Yeah. No, it absolutely is. And I think, the dehumanization of the Palestinian people is, as part of the Zionist ideological project, is like so immense that I guess it's like hard to grasp for us out, you know, side of that. But you know, and it's just like this thing that's been going on for so long that a lot of these people, you know, these soldiers that do things like this, they literally don't even consider, you know, like there's been a lot of quotes from people like this where they just there's been even recent statements from Israeli MPs calling Palestinians like human beasts and cockroaches and all this kind of stuff like that. And it's like, that is like, you know, like that is literally, that's genocidal ethnic cleansing language. And it's like, that's how we get to the actual genocide that we're at now, is that this like dehumanization over years and years and years. And so the Nakba was just huge. It was like, that was the great kind of exile where, you know, all these Palestinian people ended up moving out all over the world, you know, like England, New Zealand, Australia, all this kind of stuff. And so, you know, obviously they've had families, they've had kids and stuff, and, you know, like carried on around the world. And through the people that left because of the Nakba, through their kind of like just tireless work as, you know, activism and all this kind of stuff, like it has kind of like raised the kind of general awareness of what happened then, you know, around the world. But like, apparently I read newspaper sources from the time where it's like, there wasn't even like, you know, when the Nakba was happening, it wasn't even that widely reported that this was what was happening, you know, like it's just like, and I guess this is the same with like a lot of other, you know, things like, you know, like America bombing Cambodia and stuff like that. There were, you know, like Americans didn't even know that was happening, you know? So it's like a very weird thing where back in the day, a lot of people, it was just like, cool, you know, like in the newspapers and stuff, it was like, awesome, you know, the Jews have a homeland now, it's fine and stuff. And they, a lot of people just didn't really know that there was this other side of things until years later. So there was the two states that they created, the Palestinian state and the Israeli state, and they drew up some lines and they're like, okay, this is where you are, this is where they are. Ever since then, basically, Israel has been pushing outwards and further and claiming more land through various little like skirmishes, or even just like, you know, tricks of the legal system, or just straight up just like bulldozing, you know, like Palestinian towns. There's people I know who their grandparents still have the keys to their houses back in Palestine because they just had to leave, like at the Nakba. They were just like, they're told to leave or whatever, and they decided like, well, we're gonna go home one day, you know, but like those houses just don't even exist anymore for a lot of them. Sometimes they do. There's you know, there's videos online you can see of people getting back to Palestine and going to see their old house and there's like some dude with a Brooklyn accent living there, you know, and it's like, what the fuck? Like, how does this guy have more claim, you know, than the people that, you know, live there? But yeah, so that's gradually pushing out further and further, taking over more Palestinian land to the point now where the vast majority of all Palestinian people either live in Gaza or the West Bank. So they're two separate areas. They're not connected, and you know, around there's borders on all sides. The West Bank is a little bit more open. Like you can drive into the West. Well, I mean, before like 2 weeks ago, you could just drive to the West Bank, whereas Gaza is what they refer to as an open air prison. You know, it's just completely locked in, fences, everything, armed guards, everything like that. But so for a long time, for decades, this area like Gaza and everything wasn't completely locked off, but it was occupied. It was like, you know, like they didn't have the fences up and everything like that, but they did have, you know, guards everywhere and all this kind of stuff. And it's only really been since like the early 2000s that they've fully just like fenced them in. And that's when that's when people started using the term like open air prison, which is, you know, a term that comes from you know, the people of Gaza that are saying that is how we live. We did kind of skip a few decades in there. So yeah, in between there in the 60s, we had the 6-Day War, you know, where they obviously like a lot more attacks, a lot more claiming of new land. Around the late 60s starts to be when the international community starts kind of taking notice. And that's when like a lot of people start really kind of being like, hey, is what they're doing okay over there? You know, that's when we see the rise of groups like the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So, you know, that's why a lot of people, if you're probably like mid-30s or older, you're familiar with the name Yasser Arafat, who was kind of the, I guess, like the figurehead for the PLO and other various groups like Fatah over the years. So he was a Palestinian. He grew up in Egypt, and but you know, like he was Palestinian and stuff. So he was heavily involved with like even in the Arab-Israeli War, he fought there, and then was exiled, I think, back to Egypt. And then he started kind of building this movement, like this political movement, like we're going to go back and we're going to free our people. We're going to fight back against Zionism and all this kind of stuff. So he co-founded Fatah. So at the time, they were a paramilitary organization. So they were like, you know, they were like, we are going to go back and take our country by force. We're going to free our people, you know, through like whatever means necessary. Fatah has over time changed and is now like a kind of more mainstream liberal political party, which a lot of the other groups have said, you know, like these guys they've fallen off, like they're not radical enough anymore. Like they are too, you know, they're involved with electoral politics and things like that. They're like, we simply, you know, we shouldn't be paying attention to that shit. We should be, you know, kind of
fighting for liberation.
You know, yeah, we should be fighting. Yeah, he passed away in the early 2000s. You know, a lot of people generally see him as you know, like they were like he was like one of the really kind of like the fathers of the Palestinian kind of liberation movement, you know, being the head of various organizations and all this kind of stuff. Israel obviously says like this guy is like, you know, he's like their version of like, you know, Bin Laden or something like that. But yeah, but then, you know, like the modern kind of more radical movement kind of say like, you know, like he got sucked in by the system. He kind of ended up being like, they say that he kind of got a little bit toothless in his age and he kind of got sucked in by, you know, the Israeli government and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that his early work with, you know, with Fatah, with PLO and stuff really paved the way for a lot of these other groups that literally emerged out of the groups that he was involved with. So yeah, the PLO popped up in the 60s. A little bit later, we got in 67, we got the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who are still going, who are the ones who have been releasing statements, like the part that I read earlier in the episode. So they are the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and they are an explicitly communist, actually a Marxist-Leninist group that their focus is on armed struggle. They're like, they basically, the same Marxist-Leninist line that we've seen from like Thomas Sankara, Che Guevara, all of those guys. Like they're basically, that's their view, that's their angle, that's how they're going. So still super active, super kind of, they work with a bunch of different groups, even outside of Palestine. And they're active basically all throughout Palestine, whereas you get other groups like the ones that has been on everyone's lips, Hamas, who were founded in the late 80s, who they primarily just focus on Gaza. Like they're from Gaza, that's their kind of spot. Like, they're primarily concerned with Gaza, and then, from there. Unlike the PFLP, Hamas, they're Islamists, so their goals are for not just Palestinian liberation or whatever, but they want to establish like a wider Islamic state, whatever. So whereas the PFLP are more like like we're here for the the emancipation of the working class people of Palestine, but like a lot of people, like we've seen a lot of liberals like tied down with this whole thing where Zionists and everyone are going like, do you condemn Hamas? You must condemn Hamas, like all this kind of stuff. Can't speak for anyone else here or anything like that, but my personal view is that it doesn't matter, and that I'm like, personally, like I don't condemn Hamas because there's no reason for me to. It doesn't right. achieve anything. I'm not Joe Biden. I don't give a fuck. Like there's no reason for anyone to get bogged down in those kind of arguments. And I feel like simply it's like we can't criticize anyone in a national liberation struggle for, it's like, sure, like I don't agree with them on everything or anything like that, but I don't think that anyone outside of Gaza and the West Bank has any kind of leeway to condemn people, like people getting mad about, like terrorist attacks or whatever like that is just like you can't put a pot on the stove and then get mad when it boils,
Since we're at the point where Hamas has been founded, let's do a little bit of a exploration into why everybody who is an established politician, everyone in Israel, is desperate for people to condemn Hamas. So the Hasbara line, we'll talk a little bit more about the Hasbara later on, but suffice to say at the moment, it's the propaganda wing of the Israeli Foreign Ministry. The Hasbara wants people to condemn Hamas because they say that Hamas wants to exterminate all Jews everywhere. No more Jews. They're the same as Hitler, right? And if you actually do some research and read Hamas's charter, and there are two Hamas charters, actually. One from 1987 and a more recent one from 2018. Even if you read the one in 1987, it does not explicitly say we want to kill all Jews. It doesn't even say we want to kill all Jews in Israel. It says we want to kill Zionists. We want to take our land back. We want emancipation for our people. Now, of course, this isn't to say that Hamas isn't a reactionary organization. It, of course, is. There are lots of anti-queer sentiments. But again, I think everybody has to remember that how else do you expect, like Tim said, if you put a pot on the stove, you expect it not to boil, while Israel is constantly telling people, we love queer people, queer people, it's all about the liberation of queer people, that's why we must kill Arabs, because Arabs just hate queer people. Like, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think that's going to make Arabs react? They're going to start associating LGBTQIA plus people with imperialism. It's the same thing that happens all over the Middle East. That's why most Middle Eastern countries have vast anti-LGBTQ plus, sentiments. That's why that happens. And of course, who does that come down on the most? Well, it's the queer people in those countries. They suffer the most as a result of that. Now, let's talk about the 2018 rendition of the Hamas Charter, which they also changed to make it less about, sort of like Israeli quote-unquote civilians. And I used the quotation marks there because I'm personally of the belief, and I think my co-hosts are, that there are no civilians in an active occupation. But it even explicitly changed it to make it less about getting revenge on Israeli settlers. They changed it to be less intense. So just to, sort of like clarify what Hamas actually is and what their stated goals are.
Also, it's like Hamas they are reactionary, like what we would describe as a right-wing group. But so the reason that they have become so powerful is because there was an active movement to eliminate left-wing Palestinian groups by Israel. And I mean, this is why, like you see, like it's like a very, very well documented that Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu in particular, has funded Hamas because it's better for them to have this extremist, like terrorist enemy than to have an organized leftist opposition, which is what they had. And so we talked about this a little bit last week, actually, when the Soviet Union, like disbanded and flipped back to capitalism. So the Soviets were helping fund a lot of leftist groups all around the world, a bunch of them in Palestine. And so when the Soviet Union fell, all of those groups lost, all of their funding, whatever. They were really disenfranchised. And so groups like, people like Benjamin Netanyahu and people like, and other kind of shiftier groups they swept in and started funding groups like, Hamas and other, right-wing groups or whatever, to assume that, like, to take up that power vacuum or whatever. And, it's like, this is, it's the same as America funding the Taliban and all that kind of stuff like that. It's like they train them, fund them, everything like that. And like in America's case, it's like they just kind of did that shit to destabilize the region. In Israel's case, it's like they did it because they knew that for every attack, they can retaliate tenfold, they can claim more land, they can do all this kind of stuff. And also, in terms of liberation struggles, you don't really get much stronger than an organized communist kind of like internationalist movement, like, like the Marxist-Leninist movement, like the PFLP are pushing, like that's a really strong force to contend with. So it's like, just, get a bunch of, basically just get a bunch of reactionaries together, hype them up, give them guns, and then, and it's like, I'm not saying that that's all Hamas is. They obviously, there's obviously a lot more to it. And, like, this isn't even, calling them reactionary, I wouldn't say is like an insult or anything like that. I think it's like a realistic appraisal of their views and everything like that. No. But yeah, I think that a lot of people kind of also overplay Hamas's kind of control or power in the area as well. Like, people say that like everyone in Palestine is like, like they all voted for Hamas and it's all, they're in control and all this kind of stuff. Whereas there are so many different groups.
There has been a line is that all of Palestine is Hamas.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the line.
exactly.
That's what
Yeah.
they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas, like, yeah, there's so many groups there that all have different beliefs and everything. So,
No.
It's funny that the Israeli line is that all Palestine is Hamas, even if their actions even reflect this, so they don't have to even say it explicitly. It's shown in their actions. But
Yeah.
I just want to add to this that Hamas was also funded and bolstered by the Israeli government in order to maintain a separated regions that would never unify under the same government. To maintain one government in the Gaza Strip and one government in the West Bank. And so not only what you're saying is true, I wanted to also point that out, that a fragmented people is also people that cannot or have a harder time unifying and taking their land back. God, there's so many other things I wanted to say. I can't remember, but
yeah. Well, do you know about the Yitzhak Rabin one? So Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister of Israel who engaged in the Oslo peace accords. We're going to go on to this in a little second, but there was sort of like a peace process that was happening between Palestine and Israel in about 1993, I think, after the first Intifada. And Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister, so he was a more liberal Zionist prime minister. And he is on record as saying, I don't know if it was in a conversation with Yasser Arafat, but he was on record as saying Hamas was our biggest mistake. And Yitzhak Rabin was actually assassinated by a reactionary supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu and Likud, the party, for engaging in conversation with Palestinians. So even that guy, he admitted a lot of stuff, and he was. I wouldn't say I would say he's like a Joe Biden character. I wouldn't say he's like, he was a good guy. He did the bare minimum. He recognized Palestinians as people. Yeah. And even he admitted that Hamas was Israel's biggest mistake.
I wanted to add something to what you were saying before about condemning Hamas. I think the insistence that we're seeing from Zionists to condemn Hamas, even going so far as to blaming Palestinians in the West Bank that are terrified for their fellow Palestinians in Gaza Strip as being somehow still guilty of not condemning Hamas. Even in these interviews, they're like, these people are terrified. They're not only being murdered in the West Bank, by the way, where Gaza is not governing. So they're being murdered by the IDF and settlers in the West Bank, but they're scared for their own lives, but they're also scared for the lives of their fellow Palestinians in Gaza. And even the media is showing them as they're scared, but they refuse to condemn Hamas.
Well, you know what this is related to? The Onion did that satirical article saying Gazans criticized for not using their last breath to condemn Gaza. And then there was an actual news headline that said the same thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really depressing. But I want to point out there's this, I was learning this the other day, which is this fantastic documentary that I'm going to share probably near the end of the show, or maybe I'll just say it right now. It's called The Occupation of the American Mind, and you can find it for free on Vimeo right now. It's 84 minutes long, and it is so eye-opening to the Israeli propaganda machine and how explicitly, first of all, it's American. One, two, it's very explicitly trying to twist the conversation, trying to change the conversation away from settler colonialism and the seizing of land and the expulsion of people. Is trying to twist that away from that and to twist it to terror. And one of the phrases from it, they say this: the settlements are the single toughest issue for Israel, because they're noting that the majority of Americans agree that Israel should give back the land it captured, or at least the land it captured in 1967. And then they go so far as to say the fight is over ideology, not land, terror, not territory. So this constant push to disregard what settler colonialism is, the settler colonialist project that is created an apartheid state that is committing acts of genocide on the daily. The Israeli propaganda machine, led by Frank Luntz, wrote this guide. He's a very famous propagandist. He's done all sorts of bullshit. He's kind of a master at this shit, because clearly the number of people that are asking other people to condemn Hamas should be evidence enough that the conversation has been so twisted away from what it should be. So yeah, when he says the fight is over ideology, not land, terror, not territory, he's saying that the way that we need to keep Israel alive and people in America defending it is by constantly shifting the conversation to Hamas, even going so far as to just happily make the assumption that any Palestinian or any person that's even looking to a Palestinian person as a human being is Hamas. And if they don't explicitly condemn Hamas, now that's the conversation. The conversation should never be about that. And so I absolutely back what Tim was saying earlier in refusing to condemn Hamas. I also refuse to condemn Hamas.
Yeah, same. I also refuse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a waste of time. It's, like, do we ask Americans to, I don't know, condemn Henry Kissinger? It's like, yeah.
I do want to stress so much that it is all just white supremacist liberals who are terrified of what is in their head, just scary brown people. That's all it is. It's like this manufactured view of Arabs, this manufactured view of things that we've had since 9/11 and before. Since 9/11 and before, about like how Arabs are backwards and they don't understand things, and all this nonsense racist stuff. So when we're asked to condemn a organization who, yes, of course, they have reactionary views, it's definitely pertinent to mention that, but they are engaged in an anti-colonialist liberation struggle. You are doing the work of the oppressor if you are constantly asking people to condemn those people. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, it really gets under my skin. Like, really, really does.
Also, they can't hear you. They're not here. You're just doing propaganda for the in this case, I'm just speaking as an American because America is like the number one actor in keeping Israel a thing. You are just helping to shape the public's opinion. Hamas is not going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe 420 blowjob doesn't like me. Oh no. Like, it's not, that doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. It's wild. But yeah, so I think that kind of
covers the history, yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, up until the first Intifada.
Yes.
I think. So that's what we were starting to kind of talk about earlier. So Intifada is an Arabic term that translates to something like uprising or the shaking off. And so in the context of Israel and Palestine, it means it basically means a huge public uprising of like protest and resistance against the Israeli state. And so there have been two recognized intifadas so far, and a couple of groups have called what is happening now, a couple of Palestinian groups have called this is the third intifada, is what they're saying. Basically it's just like a period of prolonged struggle, like more like direct struggle as opposed to just, kind of the day-to-day struggle of living under an occupation. So the first Intifada was started in 1987 and went until 1993. And it started in Gaza in the West Bank, and late in the year, in December, at the incident that kind of lit the match, was there was the Jabalia refugee camp. So an IDF truck smashed into a car, killing 4 people inside. Three of those who were, actually from the refugee camp. And so the truck, the IDF soldiers, they were fine, whatever. But it was, the Palestinians had reason to believe that this was an intentional attack. This wasn't a traffic accident or anything like that. It was the guys in the truck intentionally crashed into this car full of workers. And just as a little bit of context, the whole time all this stuff has been happening, Israel has used Palestinian workers to, you know, in the same way that you see like like day laborers and Americans, like in America, like you know, like Mexican and undocumented workers that get paid like barely anything. So yeah, these guys from the refugee camp, these were, you know, when they say workers, this is what they mean. They were basically just like you know, it's like this thing where it's like this occupying force is like very happy to use them as like the cheapest form of labor possible to build on their own lands, you know, like to build on their own stolen lands, which is like horrific. But so yeah, they say that like the claim is that the car crash was in like retaliation because an Israeli so some Palestinians had killed an Israeli person in Gaza the day before. You know, like in general, Israel has quite often made attacks, you know, like every kind of slight of a Palestinian is met with like a, you know, a significant I would say like a, you know, like a leveling up of the response sort of thing. But yeah, it's I mean, it's hard to say from an outsider or whatever, like, is this, you know, was it actually retaliation? Was it intentional or whatever? But I think that regardless, either way, it shows, you know, it shows the tensions of the time. It shows the general kind of feeling of the people, what was happening. But yes,
I think if you want to really simplify the situation, the way that I do this in my mind quite often is by imagining a big fucking bully holding a little fucking nerdy kid up against the wall by the throat and not letting him go, shaking all the fucking change out of his pockets, like just, you know, constantly like calling him a piece of shit, calling him scum, all this kind of stuff. And as soon as the little nerd tries to like shout or spit or something like that, the bully just fucking pummels him. That's what's going on. It's like saying, you know, Israel's got the right to defend itself. Well, don't Palestinians? You know, don't Palestinians have the right to defend themselves from like the constant pogroms that Israeli settlers are doing?
In my view, it's like a state doesn't have a right to defend itself, but people do, you know?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
For the record, international law doesn't even support the notion that Israel has the right to defend itself. I actually posted this on Blue Sky the other day because I read this really fantastic piece by a Palestinian scholar and let's see, what is it called? Yeah, Palestinian legal expert and scholar Professor Noura Erakat wrote this thing it's very succinct, and I think it's kind of like a really it's a kind of, I think, required reading for people if they're looking to like talk to people about Palestinian liberation. I think it's very short, but it gets to the point as to like why even international law does not actually identify Israel as having a right to defend itself. But no, it doesn't have a right to defend itself. Sorry. That's my position. And
I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, after this event in the Jabalia refugee camp, inside the camp, riots broke out immediately, protest riots that lasted for a pretty long time, like so the following year, they killed 300 Palestinians, and they say up to 20,000 were wounded, and almost 6,000 were imprisoned by Israel. But so while it kind of began as an unorganized kind of like response to, you know, what had happening around this time, Yasser Arafat, who we were talking about earlier with the Fatah Party, who at the time had been exiled in Tunisia, they stepped in and they were like, no, like we need, you know, we're gonna take control of the situation. We're gonna channel this, you know, anger, and we're gonna, you know, like basically being like, we're gonna organize, you know, organize these people, these frustrated people that are acting out. And at the moment, it's like, you know, just this kind of like, you know, just like this very raw kind of like pushing back against their oppressors. So yeah, so that's when they started talking about, you know, this is when you started to see like well, after all these deaths and stuff, the international community started kind of being like, hey, wow, this is actually kind of fucked up. And that's when, we started getting like boycotts. There was even like, there were like people living in like Palestinians in the West Bank who were, and even like Palestinians that were living in Israel back when it was like less kind of segregated, where they just stopped paying taxes. They started striking at the workplaces all over the place, just general civil disobedience, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, by, after about a year or so, it was just fully going. There was just like strikes and actions literally happening everywhere. Jordan cut all ties with the West Bank. The world started taking notice, being like, there's something happening in Palestine that maybe we didn't see was happening, or this period of unrest carried on for a couple of years into the early 90s. And so, like, this is like, when we started seeing things like happening around there, like the Persian Gulf War and all this kind of stuff. At this time, Arafat had moved in with the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And so he had become the kind of like the spokesperson to the world. He became like very famous at that point, being like, this is the guy that, this is the guy that was appearing on the news. This is the guy that interviewing, all this kind of stuff. And he was kind of putting the word out and saying that the rest of the world, you need to take notice of what's happening, and you need to start joining us, just like Nelson Mandela did, where it was like, the rest of the world needs to, boycott South Africa while we're under apartheid and all this kind of stuff. Yes, Arafat started doing that same kind of stuff where it was like, everyone else, this is how you can help us. And then, this is like a little bit later. It was about this time that Mule's guy Yitzhak got in with the Labour Party. And he actually started engaging with the PLO and Yasser Arafat directly. They were even having like secret meetings where basically it was like, this guy Yitzhak, who was a little bit more of a liberal kind of dude, he knew that the general Israeli kind of Zionist population would not be happy with him communicating directly with them. So they were having like secret meetings and stuff like that. And it was like, like there was genuinely like a shift where they were like, okay, something might happen here. And then, just like JFK, like his head just did that, like something happened. But no, like, I mean, with Yitzhak, it was like, no, he was like legitimately like very, like, he was assassinated. People know why he was assassinated. And it was because because he was taking a more liberal stance and kind of opening negotiations with the PLO. I mean, after that happened, like the violence stepped up quite a lot. And this is where we start seeing, like Palestinian people doing like suicide bombings and things like that, because it's like, any kind of suicide attack is generally the way that people that just feel absolutely hopeless go, Right. We've seen this with like self-immolation and things like this. These are the protests of people that legitimately have no other option, There's been a lot of stuff that people say, like, like Americans love to go like, oh, this is because they believe they're going to go to heaven and they're going to, have a million virgins waiting for them or whatever like that. But it's like that kind of shit. Those kind of conversations are purely to obfuscate the real, legitimate, tangible, material reasons that, someone might actually, take their life in that way.
And also to paint like all Muslims as potentially suicide bombers.
Yes.
I mean, it leads into the crazy anti-Muslim stuff as well, right?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely Islamophobic. But it's like you said, it's just completely distracts from like the material reasons why someone would have to do that.
It's like Christianity has all the same stuff about, sacrificing yourself for a cause and stuff like that. It's all
Well, what that particularly does, I'm so glad you mentioned the materialism, because what that does is it removes any kind of material analysis from people in the Middle East, Arabs, Muslims at all. It says that they're all just religious nuts, and they have no reason for doing these things. It's based in nonsense. It's based in indoctrination and lies and stuff like that. Whereas it's all projection. It's all projection.
Yeah, totally. So so that's when we start seeing that kind of stuff, which is like, when the suicide bombings start, that's like extreme. That's like people that feel that there's no other angle here. Total hopelessness, but yeah, which led up to this period, led up to the Oslo Accords, which I think you were talking about a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so the Oslo Accords were where, as I mentioned recently, Yitzhak Rabin did the bare minimum. He recognized Palestinians as people. And of course, this is after so much violence and bloodshed, the struggle that the First Intifada was based around. They had to fight that much to be recognized as people, not just by the then Prime Minister of Israel, but also by the international community, because then there was a call from the international community to recognize a ceasefire, to call for a ceasefire and recognize a two-state solution, right? They wanted to say, right, you've gone there, you've invaded, it's been happening for years, we know all the history now, it's time for you two to sort of make an agreement. Yasser Arafat, you and the PLO can ask for what you want in terms of the Palestinian people, what sort of I guess bits and bobs you can have in the agreement, and Yitzhak Rabin, you can say what the Knesset wants, the Knesset being the parliament of Israel. And Yitzhak Rabin was obviously he had all the definite tenets of Zionism pushing him to no, we can't give them this much, we can't give them this much, we can't give them this much. And there were reports of ministers who were saying, okay, be vague and nebulous in the description of these particular points, because then we can use that against them in the future. Right. So they didn't, for example, define what a settlement was. That's one of the big ones. So, Gaza was the PLO was basically saying no more illegal settlements. And so in the legal description of a settlement, they worded it so that it was very nebulous. It was vague. It was like,
this is not a settlement, it's a kibbutz.
Yeah, literally. Yes, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And so so that's what the Oslo Peace Accords were kind of, they had this sort of I wouldn't even say it was a temporary peace, but there was a lowering of tensions, and people thought that something had been achieved. The international community certainly did as well. And that made it.
Didn't? Our boy Edward Said.
Yes.
Friend of the show. Been dead 20 years, but he'd be our friend. He'd come on Red Planet.
Do you reckon?
Who he likened it to the Treaty of Versailles, but for Palestine. He's and a lot of other, actual kind of revolutionary and militant groups said, they were just this is nothing, this is, I mean, and it's literally this is when Yasser Arafat started to lose favor, I think, with the more, the radical groups, because, he's on TV shaking hands with Yitzhak, with Bill Clinton, and it's just kind of okay, well, we're still living in an occupied territory. So
exactly, yeah. He's going around. He's getting involved with all the imperialists who put us in this prison. Well, actually, no, because it wasn't technically. I mean, it definitely was. It was blockaded and it was surrounded.
It was occupied, but they weren't referring to it as an open air prison just yet.
They didn't build the wall just yet.
There's there have been a lot of discussions about people saying is it a prison or not, or a concentration camp or whatever. It's it's a semantic thing really, but it is if you were to look at it in comparison with with concentration camps in the past, that's exactly what it is.
And what is a concentration camp if not a prison, a massive prison? But then the next sort of big moment was the Second Intifada in 2000 and 2005. The Second Intifada, also known as the Al-Aqsa Intifada, began in September 2000, triggered by a provocative visit of the then opposition leader Ariel Sharon to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem.
Yeah, so that was I think because a lot of people be so he went to a mosque or whatever, but it's this was actually a really controversial thing at the time, because so the Temple Mount, it's a super important place to a lot of in Islam and in Judaism and stuff, and there was like a portion of it where they were like, okay, this is only accessible to, you know, like to worshippers and all this kind of stuff. His visit there was like kind of seen as a deliberate provocation, because he was basically saying like every Israeli person has the right to, you know, to come here. Him going up there with all of his, you know, like his crew and stuff like that, it was like in the face of everyone there, just to be like, we can do whatever we want. We, you know, we contain full kind of, I guess, sovereignty over this area or whatever. And, you know, and there's nothing you can do to stop us, basically. Like, he showed up with armed bodyguards and everything like that. You know, it's like, this isn't the same as like, you know, like a world leader just going to visit, you know, like the Pope or whatever like that, and having, you know, a photo op at the Vatican or whatever like that. This was like a patrol around, and like, yeah.
I'm pretty sure they locked down a lot of communities, like IDF soldiers or IOF soldiers, you know, went round and basically like said, don't come out your house or we'll fucking shoot you, etc.
Yeah. And so there were, you know, and so this is when, you know, just like the first Intifada began with protests and stuff, and even at the day of the visit and in the following days, there were protesters that were outside. They were outside the Western Wall, and they were like, you know, kids throwing stones over and stuff. And so Israeli police just started firing upon them. There was like something where they said that it was like the chief of police was knocked out by a stone or something like that. But it's like this kind of thing of like, was he, you know, like that classic, like, what is it, the Ronaldo football move where he's like, you know, gets a slight tap and he's just like, oh, you know, like the mighty chief of police brought low by a child's fucking pebble. But,
David and Goliath shit, right?
Yeah. But so then they killed a bunch of children. They killed 4 Palestinian kids. And then there was but hundreds others injured. And then elsewhere in the city, they were, you know, in the old city, they killed more Palestinians. But after a week, there had been a bunch more deaths, hundreds more wounded. And so that's when things started breaking out into demonstrations, protests, riots, and everything all over the Palestinian territories, the West Bank and Gaza. They killed 50 people within, like, you know, in the following week. And so they were just, you know, like, and it was like slowly stepping up, you know, more and more aggressive. They say, like, there's a classic figure of them saying the first few days of the riots, the IDF fired 1.3 million bullets, you know, which is just like, so
absolutely fucked. And this is kind of when they started to build the wall around Gaza. The Israeli military just kind of like started doing it. They had like an accord that was like, you know, in the Knesset, and they justified it as like, you know, oh, we need to make sure that these violent Palestinians aren't smuggling weapons, and they're not like, you know, getting all these things that they used in the Intifada. Like, we got to stop that from happening.
And this is like, wow, because this is literally like the IDF having like automatic weapons and body armor and all this kind of stuff, whereas like the Palestinians are literally throwing stones. Like Amnesty International did an analysis of this period, and they said that they were like, 80% of Palestinian deaths occurred in situations where Israeli security services were not in danger, you know, which is like just wild, you know.
It's disgusting.
There's also, around this time is when there was the famous video that went viral before things went viral all around the world, of the child, the young boy Mohammed Al-Dura, who was a young boy. There was video footage of him being shot dead while hiding behind his dad in the Gaza Strip. It was caught on video, went all around the world. It's like a powerful video to watch because it kind of shows like exactly what was going on there. And this was like, you know, Israel like slandered them and said that it was like made up. Like, this is when we started to hear the term Pallywood, which is when what Israel calls, they say all these videos are faked, you know, like they say this is Pallywood. And you can look it up on TikTok at the moment, and there's like these just like deranged videos of Israeli people like pretending to make, like they're mimicking these Pallywood videos that they believe are faked, and it's like,
Yeah.
this is so
Yeah.
sick, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
this is the thing, like, you won't see the real reality of extremely horrific reactionary Israeli settlers. You know, they've been radicalized so much that they can't let any of that shit get out. They can't, Israel are so desperate to not let anyone see just how vile and disgusting. Like, I don't know what happened, but we're going to talk about this in a bit, because obviously we spent a lot of time talking about the occupation in context, and I think that's important. But like, there was an IDF soldier recently who basically on live television, I think it was an Al Jazeera broadcast, basically said, we're gonna reduce Gaza to rubble. We're gonna kill them all like rats. And I don't know if that guy would have got, like, you know, disciplined for that, or at least told, you can't be saying that shit on camera, bro, because then they're gonna find out. They're gonna find out what we're doing.
Are you talking about the IDF soldier that threatened the reporter?
Yeah, that guy. Yeah,
we covered that on my stream. It
Yeah.
was horrifically
Yeah.
disgusting. But I always try to remind people that if they're doing this on camera, to me,
what are they not doing?
well, yeah, there's that. But to me, it gives me the impression that they're getting extra panicked.
yeah. I think they know they're losing the propaganda war.
Yeah, I think I mean, I can't say how much they're losing, but it feels like there is a shift, at least it's visible to me.
Yeah.
If in the middle of a reporter just trying to report, all of a sudden an IDF soldier, even though there's a camera trained on the reporter, is willing to go in front of the camera, threaten the reporter, and then turn to the camera and then repeat his like reactionary mantras. And it's just like, I don't, it's horrific, but it's also, it's Israel going more and more mask off as we see things unfold.
Just talking about Mohammed al-Dura and his death, just as a like really tragic kind of you know, like update on that. Just in the last like week or so, so the father, Jamal al-Dura, who survived, it was his son that died. He has lost two more sons.
His brothers.
I think. Oh no, he has two brothers. Yeah, his sister-in-law and niece, and you know, in Gaza. Which is wild, thinking it's like the same guy is
still suffering
in Palestine. Is like 50% of the population at 18, 40% of that are under 14, and it's like life expectancy is like
19.
The average dude only lives to 19, you know, and it's like, this is like the amount of death that like these people are surrounded by just like all the time, you know, even outside of the war, you know, well, the attack. Like.
Let's now sort of like go through basically what's going on right now.
So it's a second intifada. Let's get to the third.
You can understand everything in context. That's why we've done this, because now we're going to go through all this stuff. And if you were for any reason before you know, sort of like swayed by the Israeli propaganda machine, or like swayed by the liberal sort of like, you know, or, you know, people shouldn't really be talking about it, should be left up to them kind of stuff, you're now able to see this in full context. You're now able to hear us talk about this and understand the entire context of the occupation, what has happened and all that stuff. So let's talk about what is now being called the Third Intifada. So a coalition of Hamas, Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, and the Popular Resistance Committees launched an assault on settlements surrounding Gaza, killing what have been reported as either 800 or 1,500 Israeli settlers, depending on who you ask, i.e. like which people are doing accurate reporting, and taking hostages, the number of which keeps going up as being reported by Israel. And they did this for the negotiations for the liberation of Gaza and breaking of the siege, because they've been begging people for 15 years to break the siege on Gaza, and it is not happening. Now, as a result of this, Israel's retaliation has been mass bombing, displacement, ordering over 2 million Gazas to leave Gaza or to be bombed. Now, just for context, the Gaza Strip is 25 miles long, and I think at its widest point, 5 miles wide, and it gets to as small as 2 miles wide. This is like an extremely I think I heard Norman Finkelstein compare it to an area in New York City that's very well known, like a particular university, and the distance between that and another place. But basically, it's easy to understand because actually it's very tiny. I think in like. If you're in Manchester in the UK, for example, it's like from the city centre to the very sort of last bits of the suburbs in Didsbury in the south or Middleton in the north. So you can sort of visualize it. Like that's how small it is. And so they're asking half of the people in that. So if you can imagine, if you could try and visualize that in your head, like 25 miles long, 2 miles wide, they're asking half of those people to go to the southern half of it. Now that's 2.2 million people, 2.2 million Gazans. Where are they going to go? Now, in terms of the siege, in terms of the open air prison that is Gaza, Palestinians are not allowed out. Now, you may think, oh, well, they could just go, like a lot of, you know what a lot of Israeli settlers like to say, and the Hasbara like to say, well, they could just go to Jordan if they want. Jordan is a neighboring country, if you're not familiar with the area. They could just go to Jordan. They could just go to Syria. They could just go to Lebanon. They could just go to Egypt. They can't. They actually can't. It is extremely difficult for Palestinians, in fact, impossible for Palestinians to get out because they closed all of the exits, all of the places where aid can get in, all this kind of stuff. It's been blockaded for years. It's been blockaded for so long. They can't get out. And so essentially what they're saying is get into an even more crowded area. Gaza is actually the most densely populated place on the earth. On the earth, right? Forget what you've heard in Western newspapers about like places in China and all that kind of fucking xenophobic bullshit. Gaza is the most densely populated place in the earth. And they're asking it to become twice as much densely populated. People won't be able to fucking move, right? This is the reality of it. This is the fucking reality of it. They have nowhere to go, and they are consistently bombing places. Palestinians trying to flee. They're being told that they could go to safe routes. The Air Force have bombed those routes. They've been bombed on highways. There has been white phosphorus used, not only in Gaza, but also just randomly in Lebanon, because they're terrified that the Hezbollah in Lebanon are going to respond to this and defend Palestinians, as they have been doing in the past. White phosphorus, if you don't know, is basically illegal under the Geneva Convention. It is a material that burns to the bone. It does not stop burning until it gets to the bone, and even then it's almost impossible to get like the skin back, and you will probably fucking die because it's that deep.
Not only that, but it's also a hazard to any healthcare worker that's trying to actually help that person, because touching it can cause it to reignite, and this can cause harm to the healthcare workers, and obviously the person that is injured, but also the facility. So you can see how this could be a massive threat to anyone, and anyone harmed by white phosphorus, including anyone trying to care for anyone harmed by white phosphorus.
Yeah. So this was the initial sort of response from Israel, and then things have escalated over the last couple of weeks. So, for example, the way that the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli Defense Force or the Israeli Occupation Force like to warn Palestinians that they're about to be bombed is with a bomb. Now, that might sound completely absurd, but it is true. They have bombed hospitals and said, that was our warning. We told you to leave. We bombed you, and then we phoned you and said, oh, you got to evacuate. Now, these are hospitals. They're saying you have to leave. Hamas is in the area. Now, everybody in the hospital knows that Hamas is not in the hospital. Everybody knows that. This is a place where the sick and the injured are getting treated. It's not an operating center for Hamas. And the way that the Israel line, the Hezbollah likes to say this, is they like to say that the Hamas uses human shields. They hide amongst civilians. Now, anyone with a, conscience, right, let's say, anyone with a hint of human empathy, with a soul, you might even say, would say, actually, what we should do is not bomb civilians. who aren't Hamas. We can't confirm that they're Hamas. We can't confirm that they're involved or anything like that. They say, no, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to try and enter into negotiations with them, right? We're going to have to try and communicate with them. We're going to have to try and get some kind of peace. No, they just bombed the fucking hospital. That's what they did. They bombed the hospital. I forget the name. This is Al-Ahsi, I think. Al-Ahsi. And if you've not seen this, the press release was traumatic. I would probably say do not go and watch it if you are sensitive to anything like, you know, an actual genocide happening in real time, or blood or dead bodies. They had literally the Palestinian doctors at that hospital, to make people understand what was happening, had to do a press release surrounded by dead bodies. There was a man holding his dead child in his hands in front of the press release podium. This is the reality of Gaza. This is the reality of what's happening. It is disgusting.
I want to also discuss that specific event just for a moment, because what's happening right now is Israel's trying to do their Israeli propaganda playbook and twist the narrative into saying that Hamas bombed their own hospital.
Yeah.
By the way, this has been thoroughly disputed. All evidence points to it not being that. Not that I have to tell you, but like all evidence points to it not being that. There's plenty of video and photographs suggesting that it was in fact Israel that did this. But also, Israel has released these forged audio clips. So they basically, these I'm assuming two IDF soldiers spoke to each other in Arabic, and apparently to any native Arabic speaker, this is clearly non-native Arabic. This is
I think this sounds like Moroccan dialect.
It's clearly like Israelis trying to speak Arabic. And so they basically have this very forged conversation about like, oh, was that our rocket? Oh, it was our rocket. We did that. We did blow up that hospital. So Israel's presented this as quote unquote evidence. Now, it turns out anyone who can like do a rough examination of this audio clip can see two very separate files that are being like overlaid to try to make this conversation. Not only is the actual like words and the accent off, it's also doctored. Like it's just a doctored thing. So I want to mention all of this because this is just an instrumental example of when Israel is on record saying you need to evacuate your hospital. We are going to bomb your hospital. Evacuate because we're going to bomb it. Then they bomb it. They realize the public hates that actually. And then all of a sudden they're spinning the narrative. In fact, I should also mention that one of Netanyahu's guys actually tweeted out, yeah, Israel had to bomb this hospital because something human shield, something Hamas. And then had to delete that when it turns out the public did not receive that well. So this is a really instrumental, very like standard issue example of Israeli propaganda. And I want to close this by saying, and it ties into what Mule was just saying, because this hospital exists in Gaza, and this is key. I know a lot of you know this already, but in case you need a reminder or you don't know this, because this hospital, this piece of infrastructure is located in Gaza, and because Hamas is the government, runs the government in Gaza, that means all infrastructure is Hamas run. Technically, all of it is Hamas run. The water system, the sanitation, hospitals, all of the infrastructure is Hamas run. And so we're seeing in the media now we have these doctors that are showing absolute, just the most horrendous proof of the reality of the mass genocide that is occurring to Palestinian people as they're standing there surrounded by dead bodies. Now the press is trying to say, according to so-and-so from the Hamas-run hospital, this person, like something Hamas run, everything is Hamas run. Just know that this is a deliberate decision to try to twist the narrative to make you look towards any Palestinian located in Gaza, any person located in Gaza, as being a terrorist and not worthy of taking seriously.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think another thing that we failed to mention as well, actually, is that Yoav Gallant, the defense minister for Israel, basically made the decision alongside everyone in Netanyahu's Knesset and to the resounding approval of disgusting fuck I don't even have the words for them. Ghouls all over the Imperial Core, to the resounding approval of all of the leaders of the West, all of the leaders of the Imperial Core, decided to turn off Gaza's electricity and water.
Yeah.
Now, when this was also met with international disapproval from not just on the ground people, but overwhelmingly human rights organizations, who have power and lobbying power with various different governments all over the world. Joe Biden, in his infinite care, in his infinite empathy, said, yeah, you better turn the water back on now, Jack. But it was too fucking late. Israel said that they turned on the water, but Gazans were dying of dehydration. Because we know we've seen IDF soldiers, IOF soldiers destroying wells, destroying pipelines, filling them with cement. There's footage of this. You can find it online. This isn't some, I really have to stress, this isn't some conspiracy nonsense. This is happening. You can find it. You can find images. You can find videos.
I found really interesting with the ability to kind of find information is if anyone here is familiar with Snapchat's Snap Map feature, you can go to a map and you can just go to an area and you can see the people's public stories. You click on them. If you go to if you go to Gaza, if you go to the West Bank, you can see things happening in Gaza. You can see people living in the ruins and people showing exactly how it is. And then if you go over to Tel Aviv and stuff like that, you look at the Snapchats there, it's people just chilling, hanging out, people basically living they're on holiday, doing designer shopping and shit.
Yeah, they are not under duress. They are living the life. Someone
posting and they'll have a caption on their video, whatever like that, and they'll be like, so terrified besties, all this kind of shit like that. And it's deranged, but it's this way that you can just directly, you can just see it, you can just go to the
see
map
it live.
You can have a look there, and it's literally live. It's it's pretty intense.
You were going to say something, Kara?
Yeah, I want to just add to your discussion about the water being quote unquote turned back on, because it's also important to note. I appreciate you tying it in, because this is, again, this is Israel being Israel, and then noting that, oh no, our our actions are not matching with the narrative we're trying to tell everyone about ourselves, so we can keep doing the thing we're doing. So they quickly have to try to change the narrative to fit what they want to fit, but they're not actually changing themselves. So when they quote unquote turn the water back on, there was no electricity to get the water where it needs to go.
But to desalinate it and stuff like that.
Right. There's also no pipes. The pipes are bombed.
That's a good point, Tim. Yeah, because they got a lot of their water from the sea. Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why, we were discussing earlier, or just earlier, about how IDF were pouring cement inside Palestinian wells. There's a multitude of reasons why that's a lie. The Israel is not all of a sudden bleeding heart, oh, I can't believe us turning off the water harm people and they can't drink water. We should turn that back on. They're doing that so their audience can think that they're good guys. That's purely that's all that's happening. Unfortunately, Palestinians are not receiving water. They're dying of dehydration now and already dead. Reports even that they have to drink sewage filled water because they are forced to, or they're having to drink out of IV bags.
Yeah,
that's the reality. What's going on now?
And then on top of all of this, settlers who have been armed with guns from the US, from the UK, anywhere that manufactures weapons or anything like that, armed by the IDF, armed by the government, have been, told, okay, it's open season on Palestinians. This is what this has been. And they are now attacking people in the West Bank. Now, remember before when we mentioned that actually Hamas has no governance in the West Bank?
Yeah.
Israeli settlers are committing pogroms in the West Bank. So now when you hear the line that, oh, we have to fight Hamas, we have to condemn Hamas, we have to, go into Gaza, we have to level Gaza, that's the only way to get rid of Hamas. Yeah. Well, Hamas aren't in the West Bank.
Yeah.
So what are the Israeli settlers doing, committing pogroms in the West Bank? Someone we had on the show, Bambi Kubo, was assaulted. doing something called protective presence in a settlement in the West Bank, I believe, and was basically attacked when a settler pogrom hit the village that they were in, and they killed a bunch of Palestinians and attacked Bambi Kubo.
Yeah. The way that the West Bank is set up as well is like, so Gaza is like one continuous like chunk, whereas the West Bank it's like a loosely defined area that is like it goes in and out of like Israeli and Palestine control, you know, like there'll be a section here that'll be like, okay, this is Palestinian land, but it's like to get to this other section that is Palestinian, you might have to go through Israeli land or whatever, and the settlers are like notorious for like, you know, fucking with people. Like there's videos online you can see where it's like people will just like harass them, like settlers will just harass them in the streets. Yeah. It's like, well, cool, now you want to give these people guns, you know? Like, yeah, cool.
Yes, there are images, and you can find this online. Again, you can find all of this online. We'll give you some good sources to look at if you want to educate yourself further at the end of the show. I'm sure that everybody's got a lot of sources for people to look at, but you can find video footage of Israeli settlers throwing garbage on Palestinian homes from their tower blocks, and Palestinians have to put nets above their home because they're just putting fucking garbage, just throwing out their garbage. They don't have to put it in the trash. They just throw it on the Palestinians. They just throw it on you know, the apartheid segregated, you know, ethnic minority that is not the favored one in you know, their local area. It's just absolutely fucking disgusting. So moving on a little bit with more of this stuff. So we have settlers and the IDF, not just settlers, the IDF attacking and killing Palestinians, you know, women and children. Not even we're not talking fighters. We're not even talking you know, men who are taking up arms and resisting and stuff like that. We're talking women and children. Not to say, obviously, it's the view of Red Planet. The women are obviously very capable of defending themselves as well. But of course, you know, just if you want to, like, you know, if someone's talking to you and says that, like, oh, they're a terrorist and doing stuff like that, you know, they're killing men, women, and children, everyone, indiscriminately.
Yeah, also, it's like the definition of terrorist at the moment just includes everyone that's, like, in Gaza. It's like, you know, like, they've just, you know, they're like, okay, cool, everyone in this area is designated, you know, like a terrorist, you know, they could just say that, and then it's like, yeah, they go on the news and say, oh, you know, don't worry, we only killed terrorists. And it's like, well, you just told us that everyone there, you know, that all Palestinians are terrorists. Like, yeah.
So,
I should also add that the Israeli military was dropping like leaflets onto Gazans to tell them to evacuate, and this is confirmed by multiple Arabic speakers. That the message actually translates to everyone who hasn't evacuated from northern Gaza to the south will be treated as a member of a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
So it's explicitly said.
That's what they said as well.
They're trying to say this was a confusion or like people, this was an inaccurate, something imprecise. No, this is exactly what they said. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. And again, once again, they don't care if Arab speakers are actually disputing this. They're talking to their English-speaking Imperial Core audience, specifically Americans. That's who they're talking to when they're issuing these propaganda tweets.
Yes. Yeah. And it should also be noted as well, I'm not sure if we've mentioned too much of this. I think Tim was talking about it earlier, and I think I mentioned a little bit of it. But also, you know, the line that people have when it comes to do you want to be safe? Do you want to be able to, like, you know, live in Israel kind of thing? And like, you know, okay, you just got to convert to Judaism, right? Like that's what Israel says a lot of the time. But then it treats any Jew that is not white, European, so we're talking Moroccan Jews, Ethiopian Jews, Arab Jews, you know, they treat them as second-class citizens. And there have been multiple Palestinian people of Palestinian descent, people who are known as Palestinians living in Israel as like sort of like refugees, you know, as second-class citizens, and also Arabs from other countries and stuff like that, who have been fired. They've just been sacked from their jobs, right? They've just been completely let go by the companies, and also Israel has arrested Palestinians indiscriminately. Right, indiscriminately. So these might be Palestinians who are living in Israel. These might be Palestinians from the West Bank. These might be Palestinians from Gaza, wherever they can get them. And the conditions of Palestinian prisoners you know, compared to, you know, people, for example, like there are Israeli people who dodge the draft, or they like, you know, want to support Palestinians or speak up for human rights and stuff. They have like a much better prison for Israelis than they do for Palestinians, for they do for Arabs, anyone who's not white.
Gee, what do we call that kind of system? As a different rules for one racial group and different rules for another racial group.
It's wild that
Weird.
they always denounce, like, you know, using the term apartheid. Like Israelis go, no, you know, we're not apartheid. In Gaza, there's Mandela Square, and it's literally, there's a statue of Nelson Mandela that the Principality, I think, of Johannesburg gifted the city of, gifted the people of Gaza, because they were like, we, you know, as survivors of apartheid, understand what you guys went through. And I mean, Nelson Mandela was very clear in his, you know, support for the people of Palestine, like over and over again. And, you know, so they're like, as the apartheid understanders, they were like, yes, this is apartheid. We, you know, like, we know what you guys are going through. So they, you know, they have this like square there that has a statue. It's a mirrored statue of one they have in Johannesburg as well. It's like, yeah, I think it's like, if you're gonna listen to anyone, it's like, okay, these guys maybe know what apartheid is.
Yeah, it should also be noted that Cyril Ramaphosa, I think, the head of the president of the African National Congress in South Africa, was on TV in like the first week doing a press release wearing a keffiyeh. If you don't know what a keffiyeh is, our wonderful Kira is modeling one right now. It's a symbol of resistance. It's a scarf that is traditionally made in Palestine, and you know, it's a symbol of resistance everywhere. Basically, he was wearing one. And
it's
he was
kind of
basically
like iconic
saying
from the early like the PLO and everything like that. It's like
Yasser Arafat wore one around his head. Yeah. And Cyril Ramaphosa was on TV wearing one alongside a Palestinian flag, and he said, "We've always recognized the Palestinian struggle for what it is. It's apartheid." And of course, you know, the ANC was the movement. They were basically the South African PLO, essentially. I think I might be getting. It's not exactly the same. Of course, nothing is. But you know, for argument's sake, they're basically the South African PLO. So anyway, more on the current situation. So we do want to take a bit of time to talk about the Israeli propaganda machine regarding this stuff. We've spoken a bit about the horrors committed by Israel over the last couple of weeks. And it should be noted that they are preparing for a ground invasion. Which, you know, a lot of Israeli settlers who are reactionary, they've been radicalized, and also the line of the Hasbara, they want it to be the second Nakba. That's the term that they're using. So we've told you what the Nakba is, and now you know they want the second one. So you can only imagine what kind of atrocities are going to be committed if there is this ground invasion of Gaza. So let's talk about the Israeli propaganda machine. Do you want to do this, Kira?
I just want to at least introduce the topic. So the reason why it's really important to dedicate, in my opinion, a segment to the Israeli propaganda machine is because it, to me, is kind of the same as like the dollars that are going into Israel. So the way that we can maintain a steady flow of funds from America to Israel, to keep Israel afloat and keep it a thing, so all the horrible atrocities can continue, so all the genocide can continue, is because Israel's able to play that propaganda game so well to convince people that this is the right thing to do. And so I think it's really important to examine that, because that is such an integral part of keeping Israel afloat. So it's not just like vibes and like, oh my God, how horrible that people lie. It's, to me, like extraordinarily important that we unravel the mess that is the Israeli propaganda machine, and to really like expose it for what it is. So let me pull that up. So there's multiple ways you can look at this, but Adam Johannes, Secretary of Cardiff Stop the War Coalition, people from Cardiff watching right now or listening right now, explained this very, very succinctly. Like, there's multiple ways you can discuss the Israeli playbook. And I know if you want to watch the documentary that I was recommending, called The Occupation of the American Mind. It discusses the propaganda very, very well. And like we were talking about before, the emphasis is to constantly redirect any sort of criticism from occupation, from apartheid, from expelling indigenous people from their lands and seizing their lands. Try to divert any of that conversation away from that and to redivert it to terror. Hence the question, do you condemn Hamas? So I'll just read it to you. This is a widely circulated clip. So Israel style public relations. 1, we haven't heard reports of deaths. We'll check into it. 2, the people were killed, but by a faulty Palestinian rocket / bomb. And now, if you're familiar with our conversation about the hospital, one of the many, by the way, hospitals, not the only one, it's just the one that's getting attention, that Israel has, that bomb that got really, really bad press for them. We're on number 2 for this. Now they're blaming faulty Palestinian rocket for bombing their own hospital. So it's 2, the people were killed, but by a faulty Palestinian rocket / bomb. 3, okay, we killed them, but they were terrorists. 4, okay, they were civilians, but they were being used as human shields. 5, okay, there were no fighters in the area, so it was our mistake, but we kill civilians by accident and they do it on purpose. 6, okay, we kill far more civilians than they do, but look at how terrible other countries are. And 7, why you're still talking about Israel? Are you some kind of anti-Semite?
Yeah.
So the redirect away from settler colonialism and apartheid and redirecting it towards terrorism, and then also the fallback, you're anti-Semitic, is a very, very, very like robust, like that's Israeli propaganda to me in a nutshell.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's spot on, and I think it's even changed. We've seen like an evolution of that, because I think that that one article is from like a while ago or something. Like
probably, yeah. I think I've seen it around a lot.
I think it's from 2009 when there were more conversations being had about like what was being done in Gaza and stuff like that on the news in the UK for sure. But anyway, yeah, the long and short of it. Sorry, go on, Kira.
No, you can go on, because I wanted to also move on to the way that a lot of this propaganda is not just stated, but also actioned upon, like the way the propaganda machine actions, and how it affects other people, like specifically like the threats and the bribes and the firings and the hirings and the jailings, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. No, that's basically it. And, you know, as soon as there is any, you know, disagreement that what Israel is doing is right and good, people in the Imperial Core are punished. I particularly want to draw attention to Jeremy Corbyn's electoral campaign in 2018, 2019 here in the UK. He was constantly labelled an anti-Semite, and he was constantly asked to apologise for being the head of a party that has got anti-Semitic past. And this was referring to, in particular, some comments from Ken Livingstone and from George Galloway. Now, George Galloway is a reactionary piece of shit transphobe. We don't like him anyway. But to be fair, a lot of the things that he said about Israel were true. That doesn't mean he's good. It doesn't mean he's correct. It doesn't mean he's right. But the things he said about Israel were completely true. He did exhibit actual anti-Semitic behaviors, like refusing to speak to Jewish people, not Zionists, Jewish people. So that is like legitimate anti-Semitism. Now, in terms of Ken Livingstone, I don't know the full facts about that, so I'm not going to say he was not an anti-Semite or anything like that. But again, said very uncomfortable truths about Israel. And these are, we're talking in respect to, in full context of the Labour Party in the UK. These were things that happened when Tony Blair was in power. These are things that happened when Gordon Brown was in power. Completely unrelated to Jeremy Corbyn's leadership in the party. Jeremy Corbyn, who's been a lifelong anti-racist, been on the right side of history at every single point. And he was constantly asked to denounce his anti-Semitism, because
They knew that as soon as Jeremy Corbyn would get in the UK government, he would recognize a Palestinian state. He would end all arms trades to Israel. It was part of his policy. It was part of his party's policies that were voted for by the members, because everybody understands the plight of the Palestinians in terms of like the left wing who supported Jeremy Corbyn in Labour at that time. So that is the kind of thing that happens. And of course, it had massive effects. Everybody in the media was saying that he's a racist, he's an anti-Semite, like all this kind of stuff. It's just so incredibly vile, and so the people who were victims of Israelis, of the Israeli propaganda machine, the Hasbara, are not just Palestinians, well, people in the wider world as well. We would have had a good fucking prime minister if it wasn't for that shit. There were also other things regarding Jeremy Corbyn's electoral campaign, for example, the Brexit policy and stuff like that. But anyway, I digress. The point is that if you support Palestinians, you get punished. And that is true, like Kira said, all over. In the US at the minute, there is a website where you can dox people who have expressed support for Palestinian people, and get them fired from their jobs. There is also just a wide debate circuit that is going on in the mainstream media, of getting people who agree with Palestine liberation and getting them on TV and doing the same thing that they did to Jeremy Corbyn, asking him to condemn Hamas. Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Not letting them get a word in edgeways about the plight of the Palestinian people, the history of the Nakba, the history of the occupation, and all the things that they're going through. So it is incredibly important to remember that in 2009, the then, I think, director of the Israel Foreign Ministry in the Knesset, a fellow by the name of Ilan Shturman, I might be incorrect about that, but he basically did an interview for the Hebrew magazine, The Calculist, which is a popular business publication in Israel. They've actually done recent articles about this, as recent as 2021, describing what is known as the Hasbara. We've used that term a few times in the show so far, but I'll explain to you what the Hasbara is. The Hasbara was a idea that they came up with when social media started to become a thing, when overwhelming support for the plight of the Palestinian people was noticed on social media sites like Facebook, all like Twitter, even in its like very early infancy, like when Twitter was like, just popping off. And the Israeli State Foreign Ministry said, we have to do something about this. Popular opinion is moving away from Israel, and people are starting to understand what we're doing to people in Gaza, what we're doing to people in the West Bank. So $150,000 was appropriated to the beginning of the Hasbara. Now, if you think about $150,000 back in 2009, that's probably a living wage for about 4 or 5 people. And what they were planning to do was they were planning to hire people who would go around and just defend Israel online. So if you've ever posted anything that is pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, and all these people that you've never seen before, you've never interacted with them before, are all of a sudden slavering like dogs underneath your post, calling you an anti-Semite, telling you that you're a lie, calling you a terrorist, saying that you support Hamas, beheading of babies, raping of women, all this kind of stuff. They're all paid for. They're all paid for. When you talk about, when people were talking about Russian bots, like, this is the thing, the fucking, liberals love to talk about Russian bots when it comes to do with anything to do with Donald Trump. But if you say that Israel are using the same strategy, you better believe that they don't want to hear about that. Because of course they do. There are reports in that very same Hebrew magazine. I painstakingly translated an article with Google Translate a couple of nights ago, when I was doing some research into this. Basically, the same publication, The Calculist, in 2021 was talking about how to turn around the popular opinion of supporting Palestinians, and they use the word, and I'm not sure about the translation of this because it is again Google Translate, and I don't speak Hebrew. But the way that they word it is, when someone is racist to Israel.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about the translation of that. I don't know if that's a mistranslation in Hebrew of like saying someone is racist to Jews, because, I don't know about Hebrew. But if that is an accurate translation, then it's very telling, isn't it? Because being racist to Israel, the occupational force, the state,
Yeah.
It's not exactly racism, is it? I mean, I guess you could argue that, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing where it's like, it's convenient for them to merge Israel and Jews together sometimes, and then sometimes it's convenient for them to be separate. But there's a lot of times where it's like they just want to flatten the concept of Israel to Judaism, you know, which it absolutely is not.
Oh, by the way, I have a comic exactly for what you're saying, posted by Eli Valley. It says it illustrates exactly what you mean by this. Let me pull it up real fast. So this is the comic. You can start anywhere here.
I believe his name is pronounced Eli Valley, by the way.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
I'm too online. I'm always reading things in my own brain. I never hear. Thank you.
No, I used to think the same as well until this week, actually.
Thank you. Yeah. So the comic says, did you hear there's a rise of anti-Semitism abroad? And then it goes, what on earth can explain that? And it says, anti-Semites are conflating Jews with Israel. It's a sickening proof there's only one place in the world Jews can be safe. And then next, every Jew in the world must defend this. And then Judaism is Zionism and Zionism is Judaism. And then you can go around again and again and again.
It's just like an infinite loop.
Yeah. I do want to give a real life anecdote to support this. My step family are all Jewish, and unfortunately the majority of them are Zionists. My stepbrother had a wedding in 2021, and it was a fairly religious wedding. It was not Orthodox. They're not Orthodox, or as Jews in the UK at least call them, frummers or anything like that. It was just a sort of like highly religious but not exactly Orthodox wedding. So like the men and the women were on different sides of the room and stuff like that. And the rabbi was from Israel. And at that time in 2021, there were actually protests, pro-Palestinian protests. There was a certain thing that happened. I can't exactly remember what it is. I'm sure listeners and viewers of the show will know what I'm talking about. This rabbi used my stepbrother's wedding as an opportunity to reinforce his Zionist message. And he said this, and I swear to God, I remember this verbatim because I remember it sickening me, that he would use this family event, this wedding, to spread the insidious Zionist line. He said, current events have proved once again that Jewish people are not safe outside of Israel. And if you can imagine an imam that's officiating a Muslim wedding saying something to that effect, if you could imagine a Christian officiating, a priest officiating a Christian wedding saying something to that effect, people would be like, what is happening?
Yeah.
What is happening? This is absurd. And this is a thing that Israel does. It exports rabbis all over the world to spread the Zionist message, to infiltrate people's daily lives. And again, I must stress this, to remind Jewish people in the diaspora that they are nothing without Israel. It's extremely anti-Semitic to claim that Jewish people have no culture. Jewish people have so much culture. Like, again, like my step family, they're all Jewish. Like, every single aspect of their life, it's beautiful and interesting and intricate. And to claim that there is no culture outside of Israel is not only anti-Semitic and false, it's absurd. It makes no sense. You have not spoken to a Jewish person in the diaspora if you think that. Not even Jewish people in just like Manchester, for example. In London, they have various different bits of culture. In different countries, they have culture. It's just such a lie. And it is so insidious. And again, I'm sorry that, obviously this is emotionally getting to me because this is just, I can't speak to them about this. I can't mention this. I've blocked my older stepbrother because he consistently tells me that if I show support for Palestinian people, I might as well forget being queer, because, they'll kill me. They'll kill me. And I can't stand it. I just can't fucking stand it. But anyway, I digress here. This is how deep the propaganda goes. Again, people will tell you can listen to Maya Ederi's journey of Birthright. She talks about how when she went on Birthright, she's an anti-Zionist Jewish activist. I think she's in Jewish Voice for Peace. in the States, but basically she went to do her birthright thing. Every Jewish person has the opportunity to do this. You go to Israel, they basically take you to this place called the Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Memorial. This is just one aspect of it. They do like days and days and days and days and days. You can see so many stories from Jewish people, and like the things that they say to you, the things that they make you think, like that, you know, they're constantly like getting organizations that are like violent, settler, reactionary fascists, and they're like telling you, like, you know, all the horrible things that the Palestinians do, or they've done all these horrible things, and they emotionally manipulate you. You know, at the very end of the
take you with like armed guards down into the settlements where like Palestinian people are like, you know, like they have been dispossessed or whatever, and you see like these videos of them, and they just like walk down through, and you see like they'll go through occupied territory, and there'll be like guards going and like telling all the Palestinian people to go back in their homes, and they'll like clear out a big space, and then they'll just be like, oh, this will be, you know, like our land again soon, you know? It's just like, it's deranged. It's so
awful.
Deranged.
It's awful. And it amounts, genuinely, if you ask any kind of psychiatrist about this kind of behavior, like emotional manipulation, like showing everybody the victims of the Holocaust, like all the horrors, the dead children, the piles of shoes and glasses and clothes and all this stuff, you know, every single thing, like the horrific atrocities of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. Everybody's crying. And then they take you out to this fucking view over Jerusalem, and they say, this is why you have to fight and defend your country. It is insidious. It's disgusting. It's manipulative. Any psychiatrist will tell you that that is a emotional manipulation, an abusive act. So anyway, this is the depth of the propaganda. And then, of course, we have things like what Kira was mentioning before in terms of smearing any Gazan infrastructure as being Hamas run, twisting words to blame Palestinians for their own deaths. You know, again, like that article that I referenced where, you know, they were saying like, you know, Palestinians, Gazans refuse to condemn Hamas. Oh, well, what can you expect is going to happen to them, you know?
Yeah, let me show you another headline for this one. Everyone, I want you to try to think of the first feeling you get when you read this or hear this. Okay. Israel vows heavier bombing of Gaza as Hamas says 55 killed overnight.
Yeah.
What is this? Does this sound like Israel's the one doing all the killing? Or does it sound like Hamas killed 55 people?
Right.
What they mean to say, by the way, is Israel is vowing to kill more people in Gaza, as at the same time, Hamas is reporting that 55 Palestinians were killed overnight.
Yeah.
So it's just this constant bullshit. It's just so disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you know, the things that have come out about what Hamas did during the attacks. Like I want everybody to think about this. If you know that this has been debunked already, I want you to just sit down for a second and listen to this. They decapitated 40 babies, right? Just think about that sentence in your head, right? If you believe that, you also believe that Frieza is blowing up planets in the Namek, you know, from Dragon Ball Z. You also believe that, you know, any other cartoon villain is doing the same things. You know, it's nonsense. It's not. Who is beheading babies? When has that ever happened? When has that ever happened? It's never happened. Like, maybe it's happened. Maybe it's happened. Like, but again, it's literally, they are trying to make out, not just Hamas, like by conflating Hamas and all Palestinians, they're trying to make out that Palestinians are inhuman animals and
barbarian.
They're barbarians. They're savage. That, you know, all the same things that are like, you know, lies about every single indigenous person everywhere, right? All this same stuff. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Claims that they are, you know, capturing women and raping them. There is no evidence for that. There is absolutely zero evidence for that. Carving fetuses out of pregnant women. What are you talking about?
Yeah, the thing about the fetus, that's happened to a Palestinian woman.
Yeah, so the Israelis did that to a Palestinian woman.
Sabra and Shatila massacre.
Yeah, and then the Israeli propagandist mentions it now as like it actually
Years later,
Hamas did
yeah.
it to an Israeli when there's actually no evidence of it. So it's just
Well-
nonstop projection from these motherfuckers.
Well, this is why I wanted to mention the Deir Yassin massacre, not just because it is a extremely important, event that basically kicked off the Nakba. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but basically Zionist militias were going around and telling Palestinians, if you don't comply, if you don't flee and become refugees in your own country, we're going to do Deir Yassin massacres to everybody.
Yeah.
That's what they were saying. And again, as I mentioned, they were boasting about raping women. They were boasting about killing children. There is a popular thing that perforates, I think is the word, Israeli settler Telegram groups and social media and stuff, and it's a picture of a Palestinian child with a crosshair in front of it, and it says "kill a terrorist before it becomes one."
Yeah, there's quotes from IDF, like the guards along the walls as well, that say they're like, it's better to, if you kill a child in a really gruesome way, it means that they're like, if you do this, then you don't actually have to shoot anyone for a couple of days. Then you get like a couple of days off because they stop
hurts
coming,
morale.
Like,
it hurts morale.
Yeah, which is like deranged.
It's disgusting. And if we're gonna mention morale, another reason I brought up the Deir Yassin massacre is that the one of the veterans, who is 95 years old, right, has basically rejoined the IDF, volunteered and rejoined the IDF to give the soldiers morale. This man who participated in the vile ethnic cleansing, the vile pogrom against Deir Yassin, is now back in the army saying, yeah, you got to do the same shit, basically, Anyway, let's move on, because there's a lot of stuff that we still got to get through, and we're over time.
Oh, yeah.
So there are all these substantiated claims of Hamas, and they are projection. Like that, we have to make that clear. That's why I was talking about the Deir Yassin massacre and the carving fetuses out of pregnant women. They are projection. These are things that Israelis, the Zionists, have done to Palestinians historically and now as well. There is an overt smear campaign of those humanizing Palestinians and or criticizing Israel's war crimes. So Rashida Tlaib, one of the what do they call it? The squad basically has been
I think it's
barred.
Tlaib.
Tlaib, is that how you say it? Sorry, yeah. So Rashida Tlaib has been barred from Israel briefings. This is an elected official. This is an elected official in the quote-unquote democracy of the United States of America, has been barred from Israel briefings because she quote-unquote sided with Hamas. No, she voiced her support for the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Palestinian victims are being smeared for not condemning Hamas. Again, we mentioned that. Again, there was a CEO of a tech conference who was forced to resign because he suggested that Israel committed a war crime. Greta Thunberg posts a support of Palestine and was then called anti-Semitic. Do you want to know? Does anybody know? The co-hosts know. The reason that she was called anti-Semitic is because she had a squishmallow, right, in the picture. Now, if people don't know what a squishmallow is, it's basically one of the fucking cutest little toys I've ever seen in my entire life. And Tim, you said as well that like autistic people will use a squishmallow to indicate like how they're feeling because they have difficulty like
it's these particular ones are ones that you can like flip over to show like if it's a happy face or a sad face or whatever, and these ones are particularly sold to be like if you have like issues with communicating your feelings and stuff, you can just put the face on and then you can tell people you're happy or you're angry or whatever. So in this picture, she had it flipped to the angry side to show that she wasn't fucking around,
Literally.
It's like, it's a super common toy. Like we were at the shops the other day and there was like a row of them and I was like, ooh, anti-Semitism.
And the way that this has been spun is that it is an octopus like the octopus that is depicted in anti-Semitic propaganda from the Nazis, showing that Jews control the world. So you'll imagine in your mind like now an image of like an octopus, reaching into every country of the world, various orifices and stuff like that to control it, etc. But here's the thing. around the same time, that was a very popular thing, right? Now, I don't know the origins of it. I don't know if the origins of it come from anti-Semitism, but what I do know is that the same octopus has been used to show not just communism, but also US imperialism. So this is an octopus that is being used to signify a young autistic person's, emotions, right? Because she has trouble actually, showing emotions, like expressing them, and it's being, this is a reach. It's a fucking reach. They've put their back out with this fucking reach. And another thing that I think I want to point out is there's a lot of recuperation that goes on with Israel messaging and Hasbara messaging. So one of the things that Israel loves to say is that the IDF uses, animal-friendly, vegan, pleather boots. We don't use animal products in our ethnic cleansing. Did you know that Hamas uses unsustainable rockets? This is actually, by the way, a thing that the State of Israel account.
I saw the tweet. They put it out.
They put the tweet out underneath Greta Thunberg's support of Palestinians, saying, did you know that Hamas rockets, they're really bad for the environment? Did you know that? Yeah. Listen, the amount of fucking weapons and arms that Israel uses in its ethnic cleansing and occupation of Palestine dwarfs any kind of potential carbon footprint that Hamas rockets would have. We're talking about the backing of the entire military-industrial complex that's responsible for like fucking 40% of emissions. This is the reality. This is the reality.
Not to mention that Hamas actually uses a lot of repurposed stuff for their weapons.
Right.
So they'll use like scraps from Israeli rockets to create rockets. They will also use like water pipes and things like that, like spare stuff. Not to say that they are no carbon footprint, but if we're going to compare, it's no question. Yeah. It's no question here. So
we got to wrap this up because we've been so over time, but obviously I'm sure you appreciate this as like a huge thing. Some extra things that we are just going to mention very, very briefly. The Israeli government, it's been estimated, has spent $7 million on an ad campaign on YouTube, and some of these ads themselves depicting dead bodies. Basically, dead bodies,
like the
blood.
breadth of ads. They're trying to hit every demographic, right?
Yes, absolutely. They've been targeted most popularly in Arab countries and Western Imperial Core countries because that's where they want to manufacture the most consent. So, they're showing all these dead bodies. Now, you can't show dead bodies on YouTube. That's against the terms of service. It's most certainly against the ad policy. And so a lot of these ads have been taken down, but, we don't know what the actual number is. But people who use this one particular, there's an app that you can use that shows, I think, analysis of various different, people who've spent money on ads on Google, and you can find out just roughly how much they've spent. And this one particular app, I can't remember the name of it, has actually been used to estimate. It's around $7 million, and let's face it, $7 million is a lot of money. So if it's anything around that, it's an absurd amount. It's an absurd amount of money to be spending on that. So what can you do about this? Here at Red Planet, we, don't like to focus on the nitty gritty, deep and dark, grim stuff, but we kind of have to with this regard because people don't, actually know what's going on. People don't know the facts, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to report the facts. It's the only ethically and morally correct thing to do, and it's the very least that we could do. But we want to just call attention to some hopium. There have been worldwide protests. You won't be hearing about this in the news, but there have been an estimated of 300,000 people marching in London. There have been tens of thousands of people marching in Morocco, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, also in Pakistan, in Amman, in Jordan. Every single one of these in Glasgow, in Scotland, Paris, and France, tens
down
of
here,
thousands.
New Zealand, everywhere. Yeah.
Santiago, Chile, Yemen, Cape Town, South Africa, Dublin in Ireland, Istanbul, Turkey. Like, there are just thousands, hundreds of millions, absolutely millions of people are marching against the war machine of Israel. The people know the truth. This is just a handful of the countries that have actually done, protests supporting, the struggle of the Palestinian people. If you want to really feel emotion, check out the march through Chicago, because that was absurd. I've never seen anything like it. Like, hundreds of thousands of people. It really, like, touches you. It touches your soul. Lots of different cities all over the US, and they will be ongoing. You can go to these protests. We've done various different episodes on knowing your protest rights, how to protect yourself during a protest, how to look after yourself. Please watch those videos. Just do some research into what your rights are as a protester in whatever country of origin, whatever country of existence you're in right now, and look after yourself and join these protests. You can do that. It's not hard to do. It's possible, and it's easy. If that's something you can't do, don't worry. We know that there's lots of people who can't, attend actions like that. Don't worry about it. It's absolutely understandable and fine. We have lots of other things you can do. You can basically, we'll talk about a little bit about that as well, but just another couple things that we've noticed as well, like here in the UK, in Sheffield, a protester climbed the city hall to replace the Israeli flag. Like, if people don't know, councils across the UK were basically forced to put the Israeli flag up over their city halls, and one absolutely based individual climbed the city hall in Sheffield to replace the Israeli flag with the Palestinian one. It was just incredible. There was also a football game, I think in Liverpool. I'm just having a look at this, where people, and these are like televised matches, where the fans, lots of Liverpool fans, very, very anti-fascist, very, very socialist left-wing, held up a banner that said, "For God's sake, save Gaza." You'll have to excuse me, I'm getting emotional thinking about this, because it's emotional. But there are lots of different, I'm not sure what this other one is, this building in Chile. I'm just having a look at this now. In Santiago, Chile, they projected a thing saying Solidaridad Palestina, solidarity with Palestine. They projected that onto one of the biggest buildings in Chile, in Santiago. And also here in the UK, someone projected a Palestinian flag onto Big Ben, the massive building in Westminster in Parliament, where housed in there, elected officials in the UK were supporting Israel's war crimes and genocide in Gaza, on a daily basis. So hope to be had from these actions all around the world. Now, what else can you do? There is a handy resource that I'm going to put in the Twitch chat, and I'm going to spell it out for the people listening. It's https://decolonizepalestine.com. So it's just decolonizepalestine.com. It will be in the notes on the upload when you get this on the VOD channel, and I think also on the Patreon. There is a documentary explaining the Israeli propaganda machine, the occupation of the American mind, which Kira mentioned before. You can find that on Vimeo. Palestine Action, our comrades. I imagine this is true in the US as well, but also in the UK, they have bail funds, they have legal fees that they need to pay. Actionists are always getting arrested for basically standing up against genocide. Someone in the chat has also just said, don't forget BDS.org if you want a list of corporations that actively take part in funding Israel, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Check that out. At the moment, there are calls to focus on Starbucks and McDonald's. McDonald's sent a bunch of food to Israeli settlers and IDF soldiers, and Starbucks, basically in more union busting activity, said that the workers who basically who have unionized, they showed support for Palestine. The Starbucks bosses have basically said, no, we stand with Israel, etc. So people are also boycotting Starbucks in accordance with what the union have said as well. So if you want to concentrate your boycott on those things, that's your choice to make. But there are lots of different companies to boycott and maybe just make that a normal part of your life. Amplify Palestinian voices. Listen, I'm going to be real. As someone who doesn't cry often, I almost cried today on the show twice, and I've cried. Sorry, I've cried 3 times. Make that 3 times. I've cried multiple times this week at what's going on. It might hurt. It might make you sick. It might be one of the hardest things that you've ever done. But listen to what's happening. Pay attention to what's happening. I cannot stress this enough. What you will go through is nothing. And I'm not being cruel. It's nothing compared to what is going on in Gaza. It's nothing compared to what's going on in the West Bank. You must see this, and you must use your voice to amplify Palestinian voices. Amplify our anti-Zionist Jewish friends. Amplify their voices. Jewish Voice for Peace. There are so many organizations that you can find that are supporting what's going on in Palestine. I'm sorry. But what you witness will be nothing compared to what they're going through. You must look at this. You can't turn away. Not now. Not now. Not while this is going on. That's all I could do right now. I'm sorry.
That's cool. Yeah, like what Mule has just done a great job of explaining is that there's, and like we were talking about earlier, it's like it seems like with all of the blockades and everything like that, it seems like there are so few ways for us to directly kind of get involved and affect things, but these things are all like, you know, really good ways that you as an outsider can get involved. We've seen the impact that our friends Palestinian Action have had on Albert Systems just by taking small groups of protesters to shut down their factories. And I think people are more aware of the situation now than they have ever been at any point in the past. So I think in the past where it was like, you know, hard to get together like a dozen or so people to like, you know, stage like a lockout at like a factory or something, like at Albert or something like that. Now it's going to be, you know, like I think you can really like, we can mobilize this kind of energy and this awareness, especially on that level where it's like, yeah, like Palestine Action really, they found these places, they just looked them up and they just went there and they just, you know, and they just kind of let people know what was happening there. And it's, you know, if you look up in your area, in your city, there's probably somewhere local to you, a group local to you that might be able to help organize something like this, you know, or you might be able to, they might already be planning something like that. Because the thing is, like, there is so many businesses around the world that help and enable, you know, like the Israeli Zionist project. Like even down in New Zealand, we've got Rocket Lab that are sending up satellites, you know, Israeli surveillance satellites and things like that. Like it doesn't matter how far away you are, like it's such like you know, it's so tied into the military industrial kind of complex and the greater kind of you know, like the greater, I guess, American kind of like, I don't know, like the ideological project, you know, that there's, wherever you are in the world, there's something you can find to do, and there's something, and it's like, I think we owe it to them, you know, like as part of the international community, we owe it to the people of the occupied people of Palestine to do whatever we can, even though it doesn't seem like it's much sometimes, just compared to what they're going through and what they have to put up with. I think you know, we have to do like whatever we can, you know.
If you're silent, you are compliant. You must at the very least, even if you don't have a public presence, even if you don't have a big social media account, tell people around you stand with Palestine. If you've ever had any thought in your head about what I would do if I was there in World War II and I heard what they were saying about Jews, now's the time. If there was ever a time when you heard about what happened to Native Americans, indigenous people all around the world, where it's too late now, it's too late. Now's the time. I implore your soul, if you are saying nothing about this, if you're trying to police how people are talking about this, you are compliant, you are enabling a genocide. It's happening in front of our eyes. You must do anything you can. You must do anything you can. So, let's I guess just end it there.
This week we'll take a look at things that people can donate to support the Palestinian resistance instead of our Patreon, I think.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And in general, there's always also the BDS movement as well that you can look at. There's like a huge, they have a list of it's like the official kind of Palestinian boycott list. So you can have a look on that BDS and you can see there's like, like all the different brands and companies and all kinds of things. And this is everything from like SodaStream through to like, I don't know if anyone has seen the online therapy place BetterHelp, that they sponsor heaps of streamers and stuff. That's an Israeli thing. And there's like, I've seen, one of my Twitter mutuals talked about her experience with them as well, and she's a Palestinian woman in Australia, and her bizarre experience with them, and then finding out that they, it's an Israeli company, and specifically a Zionist company, So like there's so many of these companies, and it's because they do, I guess they a lot of their stuff is because Israel is like quite small. They focus on exporting things out, like especially like tech and things like that. So so you can get involved, have a look there, and see if there's anything that you can cut out, kind of like in solidarity from anything that you might usually use or services or whatever like that. But yeah,
should we talk about kofia.org?
Okay, yeah, cool, yeah.
I think now more than ever, to show solidarity and also give money to Palestinians, you could go to www.kufia.org. That's KUFIYA.org. They're the last and only factory that manufactures kufias, which are the traditional Palestinian garb. It is a symbol of resistance all over the world. There have been statements from people that are wrong, that say that wearing the kufia is cultural appropriation. You can read a statement on the website on www.kufia.org that says lots of our customers ask us if it's cultural appropriation to wear the kufia. They say no, explicitly no. If you know what it is, and if you know what it represents and everything that is there, we want specifically, we would love to see white Westerners wearing the kufia as a symbol of Palestinian resistance, not for any kind of jokes or anything like that. That would be the time when it would be inappropriate, of course. So please, and Chloe is saying in the chat, in the Twitch chat here, if you're in the USA, use it's HIRBAWI USA.com. So Herbawi USA, same company but different distribution centers. So if you're in North America, use that one as well. It's a good way to show solidarity. Go on.
I just want to add that I have two kufias from them, and they're fantastic. And also to remind you, not just to tell you or remind you if you need reminding, this is the last standing kufia factory in Palestine. The last. Yeah. So just to emphasize, if you're going to buy a kufia, please buy from Palestinians, but especially please try to support this particular Palestinian factory.
Yeah, and it's it can be really difficult as well finding charities to use, because even just before stream, I was looking, and there's so many really, like, the way that some of these, like, I mean, it's got to be disingenuous, you know, like you look up and it'll be like, okay, here's some charities, some trusted charities for the Israeli Palestine war or whatever, and then you just look at it and it's like, these are all like for Israeli hospitals, you know, or like Israeli businesses, Israeli things like that, and it's yeah, just really shitty. There's the one that I know in particular that has been like, that people have said is definitely goes to the people of Palestine is there's a United Nations Relief and Workers Agency for Palestine, the UNRWA. Which is like, you know, like the reason that that one actually gets to Palestine is because it is, you know, it's like a UN thing, which, you know, like obviously the UN, you know, whatever, but a lot of other charities, even just even ones that get things directly to Palestine through like this very complicated series of like agreements and treaties and sanctions and stuff, a lot of the money just ends up going to Israel anyway, or like they'll be like, okay, cool, you can buy supplies, but you can only buy them from Israeli, you know, like manufacturers and vendors and stuff like that. So it can be really hard just to find, you know, people that you can just like directly, you know, you like, it's really hard to find things like mutual aid funds and things like that. Like they generally are really inaccessible to like a foreign kind of audience or whatever. But yeah, so that would be my pick. But yeah, in general, I think it's really important just to keep talking about it, keep the word going, and keep pushing back on the kind of Zionist narrative. Yeah, that's kind of it for us this week. Yeah, it's been a heavy one. We didn't do the full Patreon thing, but we do have some sickos to shout out. There's 4 of them. We've got JBP, Nerilyn Starfire, Queen Pib, and Cassie Tastrophe. Thanks so much for supporting the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, they are amazing sickos. And yeah, if you want to find more of DJ Mule, where can people find you?
Well. You can find me at linktree.ee/DJMUEL. All of my links are on there. I'm on TikTok at the minute, and I would ask you to support my TikTok if you are a TikToker, because my posts are just getting taken down. They're being labeled as misinformation. They're being labeled as hate speech, when I'm literally platforming Jewish voices that are speaking about the situation in Palestine. So yeah, that shit is going down. I also have a new video out that is also doing absolutely terrible because it had footage of brown women in northeastern Syria shooting guns for their liberation. So please go check that out. It's about TikTok Live as well. Funnily enough, it's related to what I was just saying. But yeah, go check that out as well. It's quite funny. It's my new video. I'm also on Blue Sky, and I guess I'm also posting on Instagram and stuff like that as well at the minute. But please support me on Patreon as well. And yeah, what would I do if I wanted to find out more about Kira Chats?
Oh, you can find me at twitch.tv/Kira Chats, or I'm on Blue Sky as Kira Chats, and Twitter Kira Chats, and all of the things as Kira Chats. I have a link tree, linktra.ee/Kira Chats. And you can find all of my links there, including not safe for work links that I can't really specify any further. But yeah, I'll be live tomorrow on Twitch. And if you want a place to hang out full of anti-Zionist, like-minded people, as we either talk about the news or we game, we're probably going to game more. Sometimes you need to be around each other, have community, even if it's not explicitly talking about the stuff. It's really nice to know that the people around you, you don't really have to say anything, you know? Then I would suggest you stop by tomorrow when I go live. It's twitch.tv/Kira Chats. But Tim, where can I find you? I'm a big Tim head, so.
You can find me on Twitter as Drew Conquest, and Blue Sky also Drew Conquest. or here or YouTube as Conquest of Dread. Yeah. And Sophie isn't with us this week, but Sophie from Mars, you can find her under that anywhere. YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Patreon as well, if you want to help her fund her YouTube videos. Really great ones. You can jump on over to Patreon to subscribe. That's it.
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine.